Hey, it is it's wait, there you go. I think is the mic on? Okay. Hey, it's Willie. I am so yeah, just doing I wanted to do a quick live stream. Hopefully I invited someone and hopefully that person can join on in a bit. How is everybody? I was I put a video because I went I put up a video uh, earlier today because I went to um, Wal- Walmart. I went to Walmart to pick up some supplies to make some miniatures for a project I'm working on. I'm sorry. I was originally like originally earlier in the day when I was at first gonna do live stream. I was uh oh cool. The person I invited will be there in a few minutes. But yeah, I was putting paper mache over these styrofoam things because I'll tell you. So the project, um, you're probably gonna laugh at me, but the project I was working on is I was gonna try and make like a sci-fi western thing using toys and miniatures. And I've been like kit bashing some miniatures right now and kind of putting them together and stuff. So, and yeah, I was testing it out and oh, the pictures were pretty bad because I had a green screen and I just basically tried laying it out everywhere. And it was just the wrinkles and whatnot really messed up the photos and really made trying to do a clean work from them, trying to make a clean key from them was just horrible. So what I'm kind of doing now is like I have a smaller cardboard one where I can do like a diorama green screen. And then I got like those little like science display boards like these. And I'm going to paint that green and just use that for like wider shots. And then just augment it with like, augment it with photo compositing or CG and stuff. But yeah. Just is this on? Hello. Okay. Sorry. So I'm sorry. I was testing it just to be sure that people were actually. I was testing it. I was testing it because since no one's watching, I wanted to be sure that that the microphone worked, and so it's not like, oh hey, when my guest comes, that it's not going to be like have like mute stuff. So yeah. So there's a lot of different animated project stuff I'm working on right. Oh, I don't know. Yeah. So and right now, so I have a few model kits. I might be kit bashing them with the other miniatures and stuff, and I might be getting some more miniatures tomorrow to try and kit bash the sets and whatnot, and then put those together to make my little desert space westerny thingy. So yeah, so I'm doing that so I can at least keep busy, and and wait until people come. Yeah, it's that's yeah. So hey, today it's pretty crazy. It was just raining. It was just like raining absurdly the past few days. Yeah. Uh, you know what? I'll tell you about that. So one, yeah, okay, maybe I can. Okay, so yeah, so I'm so I do a lot of drawing on I do a lot of drawing and when I'm like last night I was designing some cartoons. One of just as like kind of like a practice and like here I'm gonna minimize you real quick. Okay, so when I get it going, I'll share the screen. Uh, with everyone. Okay, so share my screen. Share entire screen. Oh, or here you go, application window. Okay, so yeah, here's so here was this thing I was working on. It was let me just stretch it out. Yeah, I was just doing it as like kind of like a little cartoon walk cycle. I found this so I found this image from this book of oh, did I get rid of it? So yeah, so basically like I put together this weird like mouse unicorn thing, and I did a walk cycle. I did like a little cheesy ass walk cycle, like you know, like last night, and so yeah, that was that, and share the screen on the other one. Application window. Okay, so yeah, this was the walk cycle. You know, so not the greatest, but this was another thing I was kind of working on. But never mind. But yeah, I have I get very impulsive. I'm not I get like very ADD, just like put up stuff, you know, like just kind of like I'll just immediately start kind of working and stuff. And this is kind of the same too, but this one's a little bit different because it's like I'm trying this. It's like way I see it is like this is the closest I could probably be able to do to filming people again. Because when I did. So like there's a few times when I was in school, I did some production, like producer stuff, and that didn't work out well. And wait, and I and you know I did directing stuff, and so and I've directed a short before. Oh, cool! My invite. Welcome, Tom, from Midnight's Edge After Dark and Midnight's Edge. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. How you guys doing? Or just you anyway, it looks like. What channel is this on? I'm trying to find it.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Am I not? Shoot, I can't hear you.
You don't have headphones on, maybe that's why.
Go ahead again, Tom, because I
Can you hear me?
think my mic wasn't muted.
I don't think that really matters. Do you have the headphones plugged into the computer?
Uh, so how are you? Guess. Hold on. Since I can't hear you, I'm just. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm just
I can hear
messaging
you.
the customer service because. Does this work? Try talking.
Hello.
Oh man, I can't hear you. Uh,
Well, I don't know what channel we're on, so I'm not sure where we're live at. Now I can't hear you. I'm hearing some noises, but I can't hear you.
okay, so, um, okay, so I'm
Now I
not
can hear
sure
you.
if
Can you hear me or no?
I apologize profusely, Tom, about the technical difficulties. Okay, let me see if there's a book, private. Oh shoot. Haven't. So if you can hear me, have you heard about the possibility of basically AMC Theaters? Uh, let me see. It was on Clownfish TV. their credit score went down to
Yeah, I
where
heard a
they
little
could
bit about it.
possibly not be able to reopen.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about it. I don't know if that's going to happen with everything going on, if the government's going to let that happen or not, but I have been hearing about it. I don't know if you can hear me now or not. So
Let me see.
I don't know for sure if it'll happen or not. So yeah. Yeah, evidently you're not hearing me. I can hear you, so that helps. Uh, yeah, it sounds like you're having some technical issues. I don't know.
Uh, oh,
I had your voice for a second. Okay, you
here
can
we
hear
go.
me. There we go.
Okay, cool. So
Now you can hear me?
yes, I can. Oh my God.
All
So
right, good.
in the settings, it had my
Good,
mic
good.
as the speak.
Ah,
Anyway, by the way, it is a pleasure to meet you voice to
yes.
voice.
Yes.
Yeah. So now you can kind of imagine my shrill voice and all the comments that you read.
I'm not even sure what channel is this on, because the one I have you subscribe
Oh,
to
so
is
so I have a okay. So here's the thing. I have in essence I have 3 channels. I have one that's Willie
I see.
Woodward. That's just basically for me to just go around and stuff without having, because I always got so there's Monkey King, and that's for basically all the streaming, and I'm making all the videos that are not animated.
What was that one called?
And then Pixelwood Studios, Willie the Monkey King.
Okay, and I think I got Pixelwood.
Yeah,
Okay.
Pixelwood's for the animated stuff. And then Willie Woodward, I do Willie Woodward just because when I was wanting to get into doing YouTube like consistently, I got worried about people kind of like stalking me through my like actual channel. So I just kind of kept a channel on my own. I mean, even though I have my name plastered over everything, I
Right.
still, you know.
How do you spell the other one?
What, Pixelwood or
No, I got Pixelwood. Yeah.
oh, Willie the Monkey King, like ooh, ha, ha, monkey.
Yeah. It's just like the animal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Sorry about
Oh, there I found it. Okay, I must. Hit
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that we're live
Gotcha.
on that one.
I see
Yeah, it's so like I said, like I said, it's because it's because I wanted to kind of at least have a some branch of like kind of keeping private, and especially like especially if I piss off enough people and they kind of get my channel canceled, at least there's an extra one that I can kind of go back to.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So hey, so aside from the AMC thing, so what I'm kind of I'm kind of curious on your thoughts about that. pardon me, because like there was on Clownfish TV, they were talking about a article from, I think it's JoBlo, JoBlo.com or something like that. About,
yeah, I haven't read the article, but
I haven't either. I've seen some of the video, but yeah, I'm kind of curious on your thoughts, because
I'm curious if at this point, see, here's the thing. I wonder if they'll probably get either some kind of bailout, or they're hoping for one, and I'm sure a lot of these companies like that will probably get one. I don't foresee them closing down necessarily. If not, they'll get some kind of maybe in the studios will help out or something, because the studios need them too.
yeah,
because they're a pretty big chain. I mean, most of the theaters around me are AMC ones, so.
Likewise, like I have like, I think I got like at least a dozen theaters within like a 10-mile radius, and like at least like 3 or 4 of them are AMC.
Right. So I mean, frankly, I'm sure at some point here they're going to have to enlist some kind of I don't know what you would call it necessarily, but you know, they'll work it out with to where like a lot of this situation could probably save a lot of people from going bankrupt or going out of business and whatnot. I really don't foresee too many of these corporations being in too much trouble.
Well, what's kind of funny was when I was doing research for the thing of why the theaters were kind of in this bad of a shape, and from what I understand was that in some point the theaters took more of a cut of the films up front than other theaters, and actually when Cinemark was about to start their stub list type thing, they tried to renegotiate, and the theaters were like, you know, show them the door.
Yeah, I mean, I know years ago things have kind of changed over the years as far as how much the studios get and how much the theaters get, and how that all kind of evens out. And I know the studios weren't too big of a fan of the whole movie pass deal to begin with, which spawned the whole, you know, programs like that where you get X amount of movies per month, or an endless amount of movies per month, depending on what program you're under. But I mean, those things can only really stimulate so much for, you know, popcorn and soda and all that and stuff. But I mean, where we're at right now, the studios usually get about 80%.
Oh,
roughly,
80.
That opening weekend.
Oh shit!
Depending on the film. I mean, and this is nothing new. I remember years ago, the theaters were pitching a fit when Episode 1 came out because George Lucas wanted like 90% of the first weekend. And then they also had to hold the movie for 4 weeks or something like that, and all this other stuff. And it was a bunch of strange stuff.
Well, actually, I think that because when I was doing my research, I found that somewhere around 2003, there was the line of ticket prices versus how many people actually went to the movies hit like an equilibrium. And then after that, all of a sudden, it's like attendance for theaters went down while price for tickets went up. And I'm wondering if maybe that was like, when I was doing my research, I was kind of trying to look for that cause, and that might have actually been the cause.
I think that was probably a big reason. I mean, I know people started griping quite a bit back then about the price of going to a movie, especially if you got a couple kids. You know, it's tough to go out for a date night and spend $100 to go see a movie and justify that. What also happened around that time that you're talking right there, about 2003, was the DVD boom. Was like at its big upswing, and a lot of people were staying home. 9/11 had a lot to do with that. People weren't traveling as much, so they had a lot more disposable income. So people were buying home theaters and investing in DVD players, and you know, DVD movies were finally available for the first time, sell through outside of various titles, which, you know, before that on video, if it wasn't a Disney movie or like Forrest Gump, you would have to pay like $80 to $100 per copy for a video store to get it, unless you bought like a dozen copies. Then you might get lucky and get them for $50 a piece. That was kind of the deals I got when I was in video store anyway. But then when DVD came in, that went all out the window because DVDs were $20 a pop, basically.
Well, I remember around that time, I was working at Target in the electronics department, and it was like, I remember the three trends I've always saw was like, movies would tend to be $20 for $20. Star Trek DVDs tended to, Star Trek like TV show. Well, anything Star Trek tended to be jacked up.
Right, you had various things depending on what it was. Yeah.
What was kind of fun was like, to me, it was like Voyager, OT, Next Generation, and Deep.
I don't know if you froze or I did.
Oh, I froze.
There you go. You're back. There we go.
Sorry, I froze. Did you hear what I said earlier or no?
I didn't hear the last part, but I was assuming you were talking about how like box sets and stuff were priced and whatnot.
Yeah. Like for a season, they were jacked from where most times it would be about $50 or technically $54.11 after taxes. Then it was around $100 for a DVD, and I remember parents would just buy Disney DVDs. It was like, it's Disney, you'll shut them up. It's like, here. It's like, they'll buy the crappiest movies. It's like Bambi 5, they'll just put it in the cart because it's like, I'll shut the kid up.
Right. And again, you'd have various prices depending on what you were buying. But my point was like the first run movies, when they would come out, like for instance, if it was still going, like the latest thing, like something like Bad Boys 3 or whatever that just come out, the video would have been like $80, and the DVD, until it would be like so old, then eventually the price would go down and they'd bring it back out again for sell-through price. But DVDs, when they came out right away. A price to own is what it was called. So it would vary in price depending on the studio, how many discs, if it was a TV show and stuff like that, that would depend too. But that was my point is, so that really changed things as far as like the ability to go into a store, know the movie you want is going to be there. And for the price of, what it would cost you to rent it for a few days, you could almost buy it at that point. So I think that was another big thing. And then, you had Avatar kind of came back and pushed people back into the theaters with the whole 3D trend. I think that's kind of where we're getting to the end of that now. Yeah.
Thank God. I'm glad, because I actually, very few, it just sucked. It's like it was not even, because most of the time they would just they would do like a kind of like a digital version of the stereoscopic. You know how like in 3D they basically just put one image slightly thing. They just basically did that like in a digital version. It's just I just hated it. But I'm kind of curious about this, because one thing I noticed is that with people, when people would talk about going to the movies, they seem to kind of equate it with like going to a baseball game, going to like a music concert or something, instead of just like a local thing that you would do to hang out. And
it's kind of gotten to that point with the event movies. Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of wondering is that did that attitude kind of just blind them to seeing like how much the problem, how like did that kind of blind them to the promise? Because it's like a ticket to a concert and something like that, at least in around here, is like $60-$70 or like $35, and it's like a movie ticket should not be anywhere near that. It should be like probably a fraction of like a video game.
Well, yeah, I mean, it used to be cheap entertainment, and then they had to keep up with the technology, and and to add these extras like the IMAX, and to do all these other extras, and you go to the other places where they have, food and beer and stuff too, and to get the extra nice seating and all the other amenities that you can get as far as the luxurious things, those add into a ticket price big time. But I mean, the hijacking ticket prices just mainly goes with the greed of the studios, taking a bit more and more every so often. It's getting to that point. Now, I'm sure it varies per movie, but again, I've heard the average is anywhere from like 60 to 70, if not more than that, percent opening weekend the studios have been taking. And of course that goes down as the weeks go on. So
right. I remember hearing about that.
Yeah. So like the weekend after that, it may be only 50%. And then it goes down to like, next to nothing or 25% by the time it hits what we used to call the dollar theaters, but now they're like $3 theaters and all that kind of stuff and whatnot. Yeah.
I remember, so back in like around 2000, it's like 2007, 2009, I used to work in it was basically a mall survey place. And on weekends, they did a lot of movie trailer screenings for surveys.
Right, for test audiences and stuff. Yeah,
right. Cool. And like one of the things I actually got to see like the trailers for Cloverfield early on, which was pretty cool. But one of the things they would always do is like, how is like their would you see 2 weeks? And it's like, that's kind of like one of those things that when it kind of tipped me off, it's like, oh, okay. So for them, after 2 weeks, they don't care about it anymore. And
pretty much now, yeah.
Cool. Cool. So I'm kind of curious, how did you get all this other stuff, but nowhere anywhere like an art school or animation thing? Was that just a hobby you did on the side?
I didn't get the full question there, but I think what you're asking me is like, no, it's all right. You're just cutting out here and there. That's all.
Animation. How you got into animation?
What I do is just hobby. I did take art classes in school, but nothing after school. The only schooling I went to after high school was just for radio and television broadcasting. That was it for a little while. Other than that, no, I didn't have any formal training or nothing. Just more of a hobby, goofing around kind of thing.
Oh, cool. I should be more prepared. I should have got a list of things I would have asked, but no. So, because wait, well, I know I heard this before. I just forget the whole story. But how did you meet Andre and and Rob?
Well, I've been hanging out in the Facebook group for Midnight's Edge for a while and commented on the videos and stuff all the time. And I started watching them between F4 and the whole Ghostbusters business.
Yeah, me too.
And just before the Ghostbusters business is when I really started getting really active. And, I talked to Andre here and there on the forum part of things, or however you want to put it, but never really, honestly, I don't think we ever talked in DMs or anything like that before he got a hold of me one day. And, I'd post all my videos and stuff that I was working on for my stuff on Midnight's Edge and stuff if it was appropriate and whatnot. And he just texted me one day. He asked for my phone number. He wanted to talk to me, and I sent him my phone number. And the next thing I know, I get an international phone call, and he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And I heard the voice, and it's Andre's voice, and just like, whoa, kind of cool. And talked for a little bit, and then he's just like, "Oh, how would you like to, work for Midnight's Edge?" And at that point, he was mainly going to bring me on just for doing live stuff and kind of just handling that kind of a thing, and maybe a little writing, I think was,
you had that other channel too. I forget the name of it right now.
It was the Film Buff channel near the end there. Yeah. I had a few names before that, but
I actually met you when they did like when they were advertising that you had a guest thing with Rob, and that's actually because I actually was watching Midnight's Edge around that same time too, and that's and And that's kind of where I found you, is when they were having Rob. I'm like, oh, hey, I like Rob. I'll listen to this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Andre just happened to hear through the grapevine, who I was or what I'd done before or whatever, but yeah, so like he wanted to branch out into like more live streaming and stuff like that. I wasn't originally brought on to do anything much more than that, really. He knew I had a little audio background, so I was doing some audio editing early on, but other than that, it was just we kind of had it set up to where it's like, oh, we're going to start doing the live thing. We're going to have the sister channel. We came up with all that stuff way before it was ever announced. We kind of had it all kind of tucked away. And then, then Rob and I kind of just preemptively with the other guy who was supposed to work with us, we started doing live shows on After Dark. And I had Andre on and stuff to kind of boost everything up. And we got going, or well, before it was After Dark, actually, Film Buff Channel.
Right.
And then after a few months, when we made the formal announcement and switched everything over, well, that's when Andre made his announcements and everything like that. And not too long after that, our other guy kind of flaked out on us, and we don't know what the hell exactly happened, but he just stopped talking to all of us. And after he like delivered his first video, he was supposed to be the new editor. I was supposed to do these other things with Rob and whatnot, because at that point it was Rob and Andre, and Kevin was the other originator with Andre, he had other things in his life going on. So he just, he turned it over to Andre and just, said, here you go. And Andre needed help. So he found me and this other guy. Well, like I said, the other guy didn't seem to work out. And I'm like, well, I do editing. I've done editing. I technically have been schooled in it. I'm like, I can give it a shot.
Yeah.
And I sat down with him one day and we went through all these emails and wrote out the Popeye emoji trailer when that came out.
Oh yeah. I remember that one.
And where that video when that came out, and so I helped him write that, and that was the first one I fully edited. Prior to that, I'd done the audio for a couple things, but that one was the first one I had ever edited for 100%. And from then, I just pretty much done almost every single one of them, except for a select few that Andre did, like one time when I was working on another one, and one the week I was in Las Vegas. But otherwise, since I've been a part of the crew, I've done every one of the videos since then. And then, of course, I handle a lot of the public stuff. And, the streams and all that shit.
Sorry, I was going to say, you seem to be more of the public, like you and Rob seem to be more of like kind of like the public face.
Yeah, and I mean, and Rob's kind of his own thing at the same time, but he does, he is kind of, obviously he's, part of the crew, kind of like and Tyler, even in the chat, is a member of the crew in a way. But yeah, as far as like handling a lot of the day-to-day business, I'm kind of the secretary or whatever you'd want to call it, I suppose.
I was kind of curious about this, even though my audience probably already knows the answer. So how does a normal script for Midnight's Edge happen? Do you do like an AV script? Do you write it like a screenplay, or is it just like a essay?
Well, that's a good question. And Tyler's actually in the chat right now, and he's one who's wrote a few scripts for us. But when I say the business side of things, I mean more of the public relations, the actual business part of it's taken care of by Andre. No, I just wanted to be clear with that. Okay. So people don't think that I'm the one signing any checks or anything. Oh, hell
no. No, we all know it's Andre.
Oh yeah, Andre's the head honcho. He handles everything. As far as like even control of the channel outside of live streams, I have zero control over anything over there. That's all him, and I take care of the Midnight's Edge After Dark side of thing with Rob. I knew Tom's a woman. Thanks, according to Christy. Is that because Jesse turned me into a woman on the last stream I popped into? Maybe that's what she's getting at.
Maybe.
It was a joke because Jesse was saying some dangerous magic incantation.
Oh, well, okay. I thought it was something because, like, I'll be honest. When I first met Jesse, when I first came across Jesse, I actually thought Jesse was short for a guy, Jesse.
Oh, there is a Jesse. That's who I'm talking about right now. It's actually Jesse Miller. And then, of course, there's Jesse Milestone, who's the one you're probably thinking of. No, that's fine. I should have said Jesse Miller.
No, it's all right. It's all right. It's totally fine. Hello, according to Christy. Hello, Tyler Bioshock. This is my. In all honesty, guys, this is the first time I've been hosting.
I'm breaking his cherry.
Yeah, he's breaking my cherry. My black cherry.
All right, but yeah, to answer your question though, how a script comes together is a few different ways depending on the script. Now, editorials or Andres, he generally writes those right off the bat from beginning to end. Doesn't really ask for any input, obviously. I mean, if I catch something like a colloquial or whatever you call it, like colloquialism or whatever, I'm like, no, you should say it like this because that doesn't mean the right thing. Those I'll usually hit at right away, or I'll bring up something that maybe he wasn't aware of. Very rarely, though, do I really give him anything on those. Those he'll just send to me, and I just edit with whatever directions he gives me. But the other ones, depending on the situation, sometimes Rob and I'll write them. Sometimes I'll write something up, and then Andre will edit something, like rewrite it or however you want to put it. Sometimes somebody like Tyler will turn something in, and then we'll rewrite it to however we need to, get it to work for the videos. But, we put all the research in, double check everything, cross the dot the T's and I's and all that kind of stuff. And if it's something where we're doing like a news story, well, then we'll find as much info as we can on it, run it through our sources, try to get some kind of, grasp of an idea of something that may not be already out there. Necessarily to try and add something to it. One thing we'll never do on the main channel is just read you some article that, and not give you anything else. You'll always get something else in the mix. And then there's the retrospectives, which, just get written out and researched like any other kind of video too. So, yeah.
I'll be honest. That's actually the big thing I admired about you is the fact is that you guys actually would do an analysis of the story of the article, because it's like way I saw it, because like I'd get annoyed at some YouTubers where they just report it and they give their opinion, and it's like that's nice and all, and sometimes I watch some YouTubers for that, but it's nice to understand like a breakdown of why this happens or something like that. So that was one thing I really noticed about you guys with the documentaries and stuff, and I'm glad you guys do that. That's the short answer. I'm glad you do it.
No, and we appreciate that, because that's one thing we do strive to do in any video is to make sure that we give you guys more than just plop, here's the news. Yeah. We try to break it down as to, why things are this way, if we can answer those questions, or why we may think they're this way, if we have to do that much. We never want to just, like I said, give you just a straight so-and-so did this, the end. Or so-and-so's cast in this, the end. Even when we do the live shows and when we go over stuff, we try to at least adds a little bit more to it,
I've always wanted to kind of ask you this question as well. So, because you've noticed that you guys have been you've been popping up more in interviews with Hollywood, where it's like Hollywood's noticed you guys. Do you think there's going to be a point where you guys are going to be even begrudgingly accepted by the mainstream?
Oh, that's a very good question. I'm sure there's going to have to be a point where we almost have to be, because they can't ignore us anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's where like the name drops of the Phantom Menace and stuff like that come from. We've been a thorn in Star Trek's side long before JJ moved over to Star Wars.
Yeah.
I don't, hold it back when I say that Midnight's Edge is definitely a pillar or patient zero or whatever you want to call it of the Phantom Menace. World-class bullshitters and Jeremy and all those guys actually, coined the hashtag and whatnot and started the High Council and stuff like that. But, if it wasn't for things like Ghostbusters and Fantastic Four before it, we wouldn't have gotten to that point, I don't think.
Well,
and yeah.
I kind of I know a lot of people will probably disagree with me, but I tend to disagree that you guys are kind of like a patient. Like you guys may have you're kind of like you inspired the Phantom Menace, but I don't think you guys are a Phantom Menace, because like I think one of the things when you look at like Geeks and Gamers and world-class bullshitters is like they input a lot of their personal opinions and politics within their videos, but you guys try to keep it as neutral as possible.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. I'll give you that. But from the point of view of like the Star Trek community and shit like that, they hate us.
Oh yeah,
they hate us. That's what I'm saying.
I'm surprised you guys aren't hated. But I'm surprised like Tom Rothman doesn't send you guys death threats.
Considering how much better Sony's gotten since he's been there, and we have to admit that's probably one of the reasons he hasn't. But I'm not saying he's been perfect since he's been there, but many a time Andre have pointed out that Tom Rothman was exactly what Sony needed, and he got their ass out of the hot water. Now, he hasn't exactly been kind to the studio as far as franchises, but he's definitely got them out of hot water as far as financial wise, to the point where you can't put Sony in that basket anymore with like Paramount and MGM, where you're like one bad move and these studios are done. I mean, that's kind of where those two are at. Even Lionsgate's not in the best of shape anymore either, but they have things that they make them money, but they're not one of the bigger studios to where they can handle something like this. Is going to be.
You're right. I didn't think about it, but Lionsgate is kind of like the one of the big studios.
They are they're considered a major studio now, I believe. But they are very low down on the totem pole. But like a couple of years ago, they were outgrossing like Sony and Paramount. So that's saying something with certain situations. It's going to get dicey going forward, of course. But as far as like,
sorry, I was testing something out and I learned how to do it.
Hey, there you go. No problem. That's all right. That's all right. It's all a learning curve. Trust me. I know. I'm always learning stuff every day. I had hell of a night tonight on toxic femininity, but no, I mean, as far as like,
I have to question. Sorry, no, sorry. I was gonna say, it's like I have to give you respect, because it's like I've noticed you like dropped out a lot of times, and like you were really hustling to get that going.
First of all, StreamYards and Firefox don't mix, and I have to use Firefox when I'm on the main channel. It's a bitch. It's a long sorted story, but the short answer to your question, or not really question, but your statement before. No, it's fine, and it's fair to not really see Midnight's Edge as a Phantom Menace channel per se, and I totally understand people who don't want to associate us necessarily with that hashtag or whatever, but we totally associate with them, and I personally, and of course Rob personally, are proud members of it, and Andre too, I guess, kind of considers himself. So I mean, I guess even though Midnight's Edge itself as an entity may not per se be in the Phantom Menace, I totally still, it may not be patient zero, but we're definitely a pillar, that's for sure, as far as like no, I totally get where you're coming from though, and that's definitely a fair assessment. And we do kind of tend to fall onto a lot of lines, that is very true. Like we may not necessarily be, how do I put this, like you said, we're very friendly with the Phantom Menace, and we do consider ourselves that, but the brand itself may not necessarily be mutually exclusive to the Phantom Menace. That's the way I should put it.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I'll be honest. One thing, I'm not much of. I'll be honest. I'm not much of a joiner, but like when I was apprehensive about joining Comicsgate, even though a lot of stuff about Comicsgate I agreed with, but like I've said before, I'm more willing to like at least be like, hey man, I'm your homie if you need me in your corner.
And that's the thing, is it's not like it's a gang or a group necessarily, or even, it's just a state of mind. It's a hashtag, it's an idea, it's something that you can get behind if you're somebody who's just sick and tired of being preached to in your if in your fantasy films and your genre entertainment. Then you don't even have to be a Star Wars fan, and it's just kind of that hashtag just kind of screams out, I've had enough and I'm not going to take it anymore to these studios, basically, and means that the fans are not going to be ignored. We're not going to be called names just because we don't agree with something or like something. This is the first time in history where we've ever had a business that's told the customer, F you, get out, either eat it or don't, and if you don't like it, that's tough shit. That we've never been treated that way ever. What's kind of funny was that in the 2000s, when I had a short stint in making independent comics, just to provide context, and you would have, like, especially in the indie comic scene around 2007, 2008,
you had that thing of like, well, if you don't like it, well then fuck you.
Like, comics are definitely kind of before the time of this.
And I hated that. And it's like when I see it in movies, I when I saw it, it was even when I saw it like getting more and more movies, it's like nah. But what I always kind of find funny about the Phantom Menace is that everyone wants to scorn the Phantom Menace, but they're actually the best they're the best people to market to. That's like, I look at it in like in a weird sort of businessy way. It's like they're the best people to market to because they actually will care.
Oh yeah, that's a very true statement. I agree with that. Mecca kind of looks at the Phantom Menace almost as a consumer advocacy group, which is kind of funny.
Yeah,
I tend to look at it more like a thought, or like I said, like an idea, like a symbol, like an icon, more so than anything. Not necessarily a club you have to join, but just an idea to get behind. And Comicsgate was a little bit different, but very similar. Yeah, you're right. And it's astounding how these industries don't see that. You're right. These could be great testing grounds, or necessarily not just that, but like you said, if you want to know what to do to make most people happy, we're definitely the group of people to start listening to. Now, of course, there's going to be tons and tons of different ideas coming from 1,000 different places. That's not what we mean. But we collectively get together pretty quick when something doesn't look right. I mean, look at what happened with Sonic. That's a prime example.
Absolutely. Well, and the thing I kind of noticed too is that when you look at properties that develop a big like cultural fan base, like even My Little Pony, like say what you will about the cartoon, that has a huge cultural fan base. It's like they share that commonality of basically of being this, because I always view it as like a community slash social, like slash revolution movement kind of thing. Because it's like, because they want to revolutionize film, they want to revolutionize how people tell fantasy drama, but they also are a great community because they'll like back each other up. They'll they're inviting, and like they'll straight up tell you what you need to hear. It's like, this is and there's a lot of talented people within that group. Since there's a lot of talented people within that group, they could accurately tell you what's wrong.
Yeah, and maybe Star Trek gets a stigma about it because it's always been, the fans of Star Trek have always been sticklers. They've always been ones to point out when you screw something up. So at face value, if you're in Star Trek right now, it's so easy to dismiss some griping fans. But what it isn't easy to dismiss is a box office that keeps dwindling, a show like Star Trek Discovery that didn't get any, traction really, no matter how they wanted to present it. Because if anything, Picard, the fact that did well enough just proved how bad Star Trek Discovery was doing. And then how that ended up didn't really leave a good taste in any fans' mouths. And they're not creating any new fans with this. That's the other problem. So instead of, like you said, listening to the fans and going, time out, we made a mistake, we need to course correct and fix this, which is what Hollywood has always done in the past. They have always generally taken responsibility for shit like that. And it's the first time in the last few years where they've ever turned it on the fans. I mean, there's generally times where somebody will point fingers at somebody and be like, oh, it was Steven Spielberg's fault. Yeah, that's typical. In the industry, though, you had that. That's fine. But we've never had it where it was like, I've never heard any filmmaker ever come out and say, well, the fans just didn't understand. I've never heard that in my entire freaking life. I've heard stuff like, maybe I didn't understand what the fans wanted, and I was wrong about what the fans, I've always heard those guys, most famously, you have Joel Schumacher, who apologized for Batman and Robin on the Blu-ray or DVD. He flat out apologized. He's like, I'm sorry, folks. I'm sorry.
After seeing that, I felt bad. It's like, I want to give him a Batman movie.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, we can forgive so easy. And that's one thing about the Phantom Menace too, is they're very forgiving.
Right.
If you can own it and you are sincere about your apology and you don't do something really stupid or bad to anybody, then frankly, people will forgive you. You know, all Ryan Johnson had to do was come out and say, you know what? I guess I just didn't make the movie that everybody, you know, jived with. I get where you're coming from. Maybe I went a little too far with this, or not far enough. You know, Howard took some kind of responsibility for the film instead of blaming it on the fans. Or same thing with, you know, the prime example being Paul Feig, who came out and said, well, you know, the fans are a bunch of sexist, toxic. It's like, you do that, all you're going to do is create animosity right there. You're not going to get anybody on your side. But like you said, Schumacher, you feel sorry for the guy because you're like, yo, man, he feels bad. Genuinely, Batman and Robin ain't that bad, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. Well, let me ask you this question, because I've always kind of, there's a few people I've always wanted to ask this question, is, do you think the animosity towards fans, do you think this is a new trend, or have, like, when they're in their, like, when they're kind of behind closed doors in their fancy parties, they say this thing, they say those same things, but now they're just saying it out in like they're like, do you think they always felt this way and they're just now kind of just showing their colors, or you think it's a new thing?
No, I think it's more of a newer thing. I really do. I think it's because you can see it there's a clear divide between the old school people and the new school people. Even JJ, love him or hate him, he at least didn't come out and blame the fans for shit.
Yeah, I know.
I got to give him that much.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I know I'm gonna catch hell for it. I don't find JJ as offensive a director as some other, like there are directors, and I know I'm gonna probably piss you off too, Tom. Like, I don't like Steven Spielberg. I find him very manipulative, because he just manipulates the audience in such a blatant way that you're like, oh. It's like, to me, it's like, fuck you, quit trying to force me to feel this way. And it's like, I don't find J.J. Abrams as repugnant as that, but I understand your point. And I'm not
going to argue so much as just disagree. I flip-flop.
Yeah. No,
I feel the other way around. I feel like Spielberg's more genuine as opposed to JJ just trying to be Spielberg. But I get where, you know, it's objective in that sense.
No, I understand. I understand. There's a lot
of subjective, I mean.
Yeah. I will be the first to admit that I am in the minority of quite a few opinions. There's quite a few opinions where it's like,
there's nothing wrong with that. We need dissenting opinions. We need other opinions too. No, I'm
absolutely. I just absolutely want to kind of like be like, hey man, don't worry. I know I'm in the minority. Don't, you know, it's cool. It's cool. I know. So, but what I kind of find fun, what kind of find kind of sad. Have you ever heard of this YouTube channel called Voxus Productions with this puppet Professor Tosspot?
I think I've ran across it.
Yeah. So there's one of I forget which of his videos. I think it was a review for Rogue One. He talked about how seems like with a lot of filmmakers, that like studios are just getting these, you know, really young, kind of like wet behind the ears, you know, have very little, can argue very little against them, you know, more malleable filmmakers, and put them in charge of these special franchises, like, you know, like Ryan Johnson or even like Gareth Edwards and stuff. And I think, and I find that very sad, because you look at it like Gareth, like for example, Gareth Edwards, the poor bastard got kicked out of Rogue One, and then he gets kind of like shoehorned into kind of doing the Godzilla movies, which is fine, but it's like the poor guy can't really just be able to create his own voice. Because like Monsters, it was an all right film, but it was great seeing how he did it, and I have a feeling it's like I have a feeling like that's why we're getting like this new generation of filmmakers. I have a feeling that's what's going to happen, is they're going to get kind of used to being bullied into doing their. I'm going to shut up now.
No. I mean, I'm trying to see your angle, because he did Godzilla before he did Star Wars.
Yeah, he did Godzilla. Godzilla. He did Godzilla. Then he did Rogue One, which he got kicked out of. Yeah. And then he got kind of stuck doing Godzilla 2.
I think he just produced that. I don't think he directed that one.
Oh, okay. I'll double check on that. But yeah, it's like I kind of feel bad because it's like you see, like even Ryan Johnson. It's like, well, aside from his two biggest films, was one a film that was really hated, and two, well, actually, I don't know if you're going to count Looper because I was thinking Knives Out and Star Wars, but it's like Knives Out. It's like Knives Out. He just did it as a direct fu to the people who didn't like Star Wars. Yeah, but
in some people's opinions, yeah, and some others, I haven't seen the film, so I can't directly comment on that part of it. But I have seen Looper.
Yeah.
As far as I kind of get what you're getting at, and that's a fair assessment. This is a different time for directors. Like to bring up Spielberg again. I mean, Spielberg didn't. There wasn't exactly franchises when guys like Spielberg started. They were kind of new. Like Star Wars was different. Planet of the Apes was one of the few things you had on the big screen, other than like the 50s and earlier than that horror films, were the only times you really had a lot of movies that tied together and were kind of a quote unquote franchise. Otherwise, sequels and all that kind of stuff were generally like the ugly redheaded stepchild.
Right.
It was something that the theater that the studios knew that they could throw out in the theaters. They'd get at least half of, if not more than the original audience back, and as long as they knew the original one made enough money, they could kind of bank on it. So it kind of became the sure thing. But again, even Paramount was so embarrassed about Friday the 13th, for instance, even though them movies made so much money for them, like hand over fist. I mean, it's just the way that they kind of looked at them back then. And then in the 90s, it kind of changed. You had the Jurassic Parks and the Batmans, and where people kind of seen, okay, there's going to be more than one of these. And Tim Burton, you can kind of hear him speaking of Batman in the special features.
Yeah.
Where he kind of talked about, this is the first time where he kind of started realizing they were having these conversations. And he's like, we started saying things like, well, if we don't get it to this time, we'll get it in the next one. And it was just how he said that was just like, it was just weird.
Right.
Kind of think in that respect, because you didn't really think like that back then. You were thinking more of, this is the movie we're doing now. We're not worried about what's coming next,
Right.
kind of
No, exactly. Well, what I found kind of funny was there was this book I read about Roger Corman, and he was talking about how Martin Scorsese was arguing with him about, aside from Goodfellas, they argued about Goodfellas because Corman wanted a black cast, and Scorsese wanted an Italian cast, and how they basically kind of parted ways because of that. And it seemed kind of like at that time with the 60s and the 70s, you were having a more filmmaker based based films, and I don't know, maybe it's because of the budgets and stuff like that, you don't quite have that as much anymore. Because I mean, like outside of like Tarantino, Tim Burton, outside of like the big 90s auteurs, who else is really an auteur? Or like a filmmaker? Who else has a real filmmaker driven film?
That's that's jumping off a good assessment from before. There's a little bit, I think, more to the answer to just the question you just posed and the one you did before too. No. I just want to get to the main part of it. Beef. The reason why I think some of these, and you're right, you're totally right on the right track, but the context of it is really difficult to get through without getting through some history. Back when like Scorsese and George Lucas and Spielberg and what's his face who directed shit like Body Double and stuff.
Brian De
Palma, all those guys, yeah. When those guys were coming up, the studios were changing over from the studio system, which it was back in the day. It was more like how television is. You had your actors under contract, you had your directors and all this shit under contract, and they just kind of worked for whatever money it was. They didn't have to negotiate a contract. It was, you got your contract, you work for 5 movies. If you do a good job, we'll give you a better contract for another 5 movies. You worked for one studio only. You didn't do anything else. You just did what they told you to. Then all these other companies started coming in and buying out the studios because the old regime was literally dying out and moving on and retiring and whatnot, to the point where You had like Seagram's and all these Coke and some other companies. Gulf Western came in and bought Paramount, for instance.
Right.
Like all these different companies that really didn't know how to make movies, but they knew how to market stuff and they knew how to sell stuff. So they told guys like Spielberg and Lucas, and go make us some of these things, and Francis Ford Coppola and all those guys, go make us whatever it is you're going to do, bring it back and we'll sell it. So you're right. They had a lot more room to breathe. They could, use their voice a little bit louder than they can now. Now, of course, they were limited by budgets too back then. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah.
Star Wars damn near killed George Lucas. Jaws damn near killed Steven Spielberg. The Godfather damn near killed Francis Ford Coppola. But now 3 of those movies I just named are 3 of the biggest movies of all time. And there's a reason for that, and that's because the studios didn't know what the hell to do, but they trusted in these kids, and they just sold the hell out of these movies, and they made some great movies. And then you got into the franchise age, which guys like, now with, like you brought up, Ryan Johnson and JJ and all those guys, these younger up and coming, even Kurtzman and all these kind of guys, the difference between them and the old school is, you're right. There's the franchise is what you want to get into. As opposed to making your own kind of statement. If you can get into a franchise, then after you're done doing your franchise, then you can go make your statement. That's kind of the way these movies have become now, and I don't agree with that, because instead of seeing guys like Sam Raimi, who took on Spider-Man, Tim Burton, who took on Batman, guys who already had done a few movies, proven themselves. Tim Burton had worked in animation for years. Then he made Pee-wee, then he made Beetlejuice. He'd done some work before he, granted, he probably didn't do enough to deserve Batman, but at that time, I don't think Warner Brothers realized how big of a deal Batman was going to be.
Yeah, I think that was the case. Yeah.
Now, here's the difference: is I don't think guys like Ryan Johnson and that should be making Star Wars movies, and not for maybe the reasons you're thinking, but for the specific reasons of why you said, because they have a stronger voice. They should be making stuff like Knives Out. They should be making stuff like Looper. They shouldn't be making Star Wars, because once you get to that point, making something like Star Wars, making something like a Marvel movie, making something like a DC movie, this is why, too many voices in that situation ruined everything too, is because you have to have a driving force. That's why Marvel has worked for so long. That's why they've got 20 some movies and they keep making more and more money instead of less and less, is because Kevin Feige has a vision overall for this entire universe. He picks directors who he can work with. That's why Edgar Wright didn't make Ant-Man, because as much as fun as it could have been, he knew that wasn't going to fit in within their Marvel universe. And somebody like Edgar Wright has a very strong voice. So you have to let Edgar Wright make an Edgar Wright movie. And at this time, that's not in tune with what they were doing. So you're not going to be able to get some of those kind of movies, but you're going to have to sacrifice a few of those to get, a Marvel Cinematic Universe. But on the other end, you let an auteur come in, like Todd Phillips did with the Joker, and make sure it's not connected with anything, and you can let them go wild. And we've seen what can happen. Magic can happen.
Right.
So you're right. There is a line. There's a gray area, and things have just flip-flopped since the days of Lucas and Spielberg and all that. And then like Tarantino and all those guys came in during the independent age, where independent films were the new thing, where people, because they were looking for new, fresh voices.
Absolutely.
And that's where they found them, was in the independent field. But yeah, we're in a totally different era now than then.
Now, do you think, going back to before, it's like with like Todd Phillips with Joker, Ryan Johnson with Knives Out, do you think we're going to see a pendulum shift between coming back to like filmmaker driven movies?
I think the studios will take a little bit more chances, like with Joker, which could result in more Last Jedis. That's the problem. If you don't, the problem with Hollywood is they always learn the wrong lesson from everything. Yeah. Like they didn't learn anything from Wonder Woman, really, I don't think. Instead of learning that, there's already strong female characters out there and people will go see them, they just doubled down on the stupid, I guess, because then we got Birds of Prey. I mean,
well, like what was really frustrating with like the thing with Wonder Woman is like, so in the comic books is like you're strong, like most of the strong female characters within Marvel Comics were owned by somebody else, so they couldn't do very many, but they managed to make Black Widow an effective character. And I'm like, that was one of those things where it's like everyone was just frustrated with like, why are we not getting a Black Widow movie? And it's like, that was like the wrong lesson they learned. It's like, no, give us the female characters who are already, successful.
That's a very good point. We've all said the same thing. And I think there was just a miscommunication there. And some of that's Bob Iger. Because if you've read his book, he was very insistent on making Captain Marvel. And Feige really wanted to make Black Panther. And I'm sure he thought about making a Black Widow movie at some point. I mean, Iron Man 2 is kind of a semi-Black Widow movie in a weird way. But she's like almost second banana in that movie.
Yeah.
He said that Ike Perlmutter was against any Black leading characters or women leading characters because they don't sell figures, which is an unprogressive, old school way of thinking. And, you don't have to be anti-SJW to still turn around and say that's not right think. But instead of coming out of that, like you said, instead of Black Widow getting a movie, we get Captain Marvel instead, and that was so much wrong we don't even need to get into.
Well, because the thing was kind of if I'm not mistaken, I think you guys covered this, is that in the email leaks from Sony, it was that the whole reason there wasn't a Black Widow movie was because Ike Perlmutter didn't want any women-led superheroes.
Right. Like I said, he said women and Black characters don't sell toys.
Yeah.
That was his reasoning. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was looking for the numbers on it because I hate the fact that this is true, but I've noticed throughout my being a toy enthusiast throughout the time, you do tend to that is part of the reason why you do tend to not have that many female action figures. And it's like, I can kind of see, it's like, I remember when Spider-Man came out, there was like tons of Mary Jane Watson toys like sitting on the shelves. So it's like, I can see his point. I totally disagree with it. And I totally I think that's totally it's a risk you should take.
Yeah. Like I said, you don't even have to be an SJW to see. I worded it wrongly, but you don't even have to be an SJW to see that's wrong think. It's like, come on, take a chance. Black Widow, and there's other female characters.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And Black Panther proved it was a big hit.
Oh, yeah.
You can even argue Captain Marvel was a big hit, but
well, what's funny is that so my girlfriend, she is a huge animal lover, and I stopped going to Marvel movies, and even then when Captain Marvel came out, I'm like, well, hey, do you want to see Captain Marvel? It's like, well, it's like they do have a cute kitty, She was like, no, screw that. And I think that's the only Marvel movie she personally hasn't seen.
Huh. Well, and I didn't care for the movie, obviously. So, I can't speak to that, but it's all right. It's all right. No, I know. I can't help but not blame Bob Iger most of all for this mess.
Oh, yeah.
And I hope it's not where the MCU is going, but that's a whole nother can of worms to get into. But just back to what you were saying before, as far as the whole thing, like I said, you got to kind of, if we can get Hollywood done, because I didn't even really like Wonder Woman all that much, but my point is Wonder Woman was around for almost 80 years and she finally got a movie.
I know, that was,
it's like, why aren't we getting all these characters that exist already their own movies? I mean, there's tons of strong female characters that you could bounce off of, or pick up now that have never had a chance or haven't been dusted off in years, and stuff like that. And they do sometimes, but it just feels like I would hate to see a female character that I love be turned into a man. I don't need to see Wonder Man. No, I don't want some secondary bullshit like that. I can totally see from a woman's point of view, why should I tread in the footsteps where men have tread before? I want my own thing. Absolutely. That's totally understandable as well.
And in all fairness too, William Marsden, when he created Wonder Woman, that was his whole entire point of view in making Wonder Woman at all, was just the fact of hey, he was a huge proponent of women's rights, and he was women's liberation and stuff. And
absolutely. And I know a little bit about him too. And That's just it. And the best thing is she's not Superwoman.
Right.
You know, she's not Supergirl. She's not just another Batgirl
Right.
or whatever, you know, to where she is her own thing. And that's the best part about her. And that's where I think, I hope that, you know, they take a step back, reevaluate things. And I think that's where Marvel's kind of like, they've been backing off a little bit on Captain Marvel, just a little bit, because Kevin Feige even backtracked on her being the most strongest character in the Marvel universe. He's now claiming once again that it's Wanda. So,
which is fine. That's like, I'll be honest. I didn't like. I'm kind of lukewarm about Scarlet Witch in the MCU, but I'm glad that he at least admitted she was like a powerhouse, because it's like, dude, she was like the House of, like House of M, all the other stuff. It's like, dude, she could totally destroy the world without even thinking.
Well, I think it's kind of odd anyway, because first of all of them only have power because they got power from a stone anyway. Most of them, outside of Thor and the Hulk. Otherwise they're humans, or they get power from their suits or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, well, Steve Rogers is a superhuman. But he's not indestructible.
Well, I don't think at least I know in Homecoming they haven't discussed how he got his powers. But
that's true, but that's the kind of old school way. But you know, going into the next part though, I hope they realize, you know, we can back off on this. We don't need to freak out now. We've got the X-Men. The X-Men have some of the premier female characters, because you know we could sit here and go back and forth for fucking 10 minutes probably about how many great female characters there are in X-Men. I mean, most people don't even have a problem with Storm being the leader. I mean, come on. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's nothing to do with them being women. It's who they are and what they do with these characters. That's the main thing. Yeah.
Well, like I always agree with. Do you remember Amalgam Comics in the?
I think so.
In the 90s, it was like Marvel and DC kind of did a mashup of their superheroes, and like they mashed up Captain America with Superman, Batman with Wolverine. They combined Storm with Wonder Woman, and to me it's like, duh. And so when I remember, like in the comics in the 2000s, I was like, why don't you bring in Storm more front and center? It's like, come on, dude, duh. It's like, quit bringing in Captain Marvel, quit bringing in She-Hulk. It's like, no, stop.
Well, right, and just look at some of the names in the chat already. Rogue. You know, I mean, nobody said Jean Grey yet. Well, she's arguably probably one of the strongest Marvel characters out there. Yeah.
Psylocke.
Especially when she's fucking Dark Phoenix. She's damn near indestructible. You know, I mean, there's all kinds. Jubilee is another great one. Yeah, I mean, look at all these great female characters that they haven't even touched yet.
I have a question. Have you heard the rumor about Psylocke possibly being in Shang-Chi?
I think so. I haven't heard too much about Shang-Chi. Most of what I know about Shang-Chi has more to do with just what's her face from Star Trek.
Yeah, no. So, well, basically, from what I understand, is that it's the plot of the movie is sort of like Game of Death meets Marvel movie, because he's supposed to enter in some tournament. That's the apparent plot, and apparently there is a rumor that Psylocke is going to cameo as Lady Mandarin.
Interesting.
Yeah, like currently I'm laid off, but just like around when my job was winding down, I was doing a lot of research on possible like film rumors, and that was like the Rogue and Captain Marvel 2 was one of them. Psylocke was another one. Yeah, there was one also too where there's one rumor, I don't know if you've heard this one, which I hope I actually hope it's legit, is that they're going to have the main bad guy in Black Panther 2 is going to be Doctor Doom.
That I have heard, but I've also heard that rumor before about them introducing Kraven the Hunter, but I think I don't know if that was true or not. So
I heard that one. So that one was that they wanted to use him instead of Killmonger, but Sony said no. And so they were kind of debating, so they were kind of with the deal with the Spider-Man deal, they were kind of hoping to use Kraven, and if they're gonna use Kraven, they'll make him a Wakandan.
Yeah, because that's where we had heard it was supposed to be set up for Spider-Man 3, but that was, of course, before we knew there was any problems, and I did not know that aspect of it really either. But yeah, according to Christy, says you should reach out to Danny from Comic Chat.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Okay, I'll totally take I will totally do it after the chat, after this chat. And I know like they were talking like Shellback and stuff mentioned X-23. Come on, no X-23. She's like the Batgirl of Wolverine. Come on.
I didn't mind how they did her in Logan, but
oh yeah, no, that was cool. But I mean, that was fine. But I
don't want her as a replacement though. No.
Well, like when she came out, that was around the time you got more Marvel Comics where it's like gender swapping a lot of characters. Like they gender swapped Loki. Right. They had X-23 to try to replace Wolverine. And I'm trying to remember who else did they bring to kind of because that Iron Man was later, but they were basically trying to swap people out. And I'll be honest, I never liked X-23. I never liked I was like, stop making X-23 a thing. But,
yeah, I can see where I don't like the replacement aspect of it now.
Yeah.
I mean, with him, it makes sense if it's a clone and all that kind of crap. That's a different story. But
yeah,
that's like I said, I like how they did it in Logan, but I don't need, I don't need Iron Girl. I don't need Lady Thor.
Right.
I'm willing to give Taika Waititi the benefit of the doubt that hopefully he'll have some fun with this and he's got a plan that's acceptable. Because I did like Ragnarok. I know a lot of people didn't, but
I haven't seen Ragnarok, but I don't know. It's like that's either gonna I know a lot of people are kind of trying to tout him as kind of like the next James Gunn, but I'm like, I don't know, because like I know my in-law, my girlfriend or family, my in-laws, they're from New Zealand, and they saw him on the Flying Condors, I think it's called. And it's like they liked him then, and that's and they saw them, and they fucking loved the vampire one.
What We Do in the Shadows or whatever.
Yeah. And so they kind of were like they're kind of into him, but
yeah, I enjoyed that movie too. And Ragnarok, I mean, I get some people's gripes with it, but I full on love it, and every time I've seen it, I love it even more. Like I'm thinking about it, I want to go watch it right now. And Andre loves it too. So
Yeah, no, I understand.
And he's Norwegian, so.
Oh, I actually like the last MCU movie. I think I saw a little bit of. I saw a little bit. I saw Endgame. I did see Endgame. My girlfriend forced me to watch Endgame. But and it's like, yeah, it was pretty. The scene with Thor when they're in the Nordic country and they're playing Call of Duty, it's like, yeah, that was pretty funny. That was a pretty funny part.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't like Fat Thor, but Andre's like, that's what Thor it really looks like.
Oh yeah, but I didn't. Yeah, sure. Well, I didn't like Fat Thor either because it's like, dude, that like I saw him in person once at a comic book convention. Chris Hemsworth is fucking huge. And this was before he got even buffer with Thor. This was like after Star Trek and just before he was going to do Thor. That motherfucker was ripped and that motherfucker was tall. He was like 6 something. And I
wouldn't make fun of his mom.
Oh yeah, good point. Good point. But like I'm like 5'5" or something like that. So I was like, it's like that guy like was like twice 2 of me. 2 of me would they be able to face that guy? It's like that. It's like Fat Thor. It's like, oh yeah, and I agree with you. According to Christy, Chris Hemsworth he's very
a pretty man.
Yes, he is a pretty man. I don't know. Just as an aside, according to Christy, I don't know if you've ever seen the Ron Howard movie Rush. Dude, totally watch that movie because not only there's like a couple of scenes where like Chris Hemsworth totally takes off his shirt and he's totally acting all sexy, but it's a really good movie.
That is one I haven't seen yet, but it's been on my list for so long. That's the one problem with working at a, because when I used to have a job, I used to have time to watch movies and shit, even when I was doing some of my YouTube stuff on the side.
Yeah.
But now that I do this, I never have enough time to watch anything.
Oh, really?
But yeah, it's crazy.
No, so I'm a bit of a workaholic with my own stuff. And like the only reason I actually have any sort of social life is my girlfriend will be like, stop what you're doing. We are going to spend quality time at the movies, or you're taking me out somewhere and for quality time. And that's the only reason why I've seen any movies.
No, I hear you.
No.
Chris Hemsworth is 6'3", according to Google.
Oh, cool. Okay, 6. Okay, he's fucking tall. That's all.
That's very tall, especially for a white man. That's very tall.
Oh yeah. So, one more question to kind of pick your brain. Do you think there? Okay, I'm trying. I don't know how to word it right, so I'm just gonna basically just have a word salad, and hopefully a question will come in there. So, do you think there is a possibility of more original stuff coming through to like movies or through to YouTube or stuff?
That's a very good question. I think television has already kind of gotten to that point where that's like a lot of the more original ideas go to play. Mm-hmm. I think even Robert Meyer Burnett would be one to agree with me there, where you can take a lot more chances on something. Something gets a little bit more chance to kind of tell its story, more of a chance to get to know characters and build a world. But there's movies like Baby Driver and even Joker, even though it's based on another property, and a few other movies we've had in the last couple of years here that have done really well without being part of some kind of franchise. That there's always that possibility. And look at like guys like Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino, who are constantly doing something original. And even though Quentin likes to take old tropes, it's still original in how he does it.
True. But, I mean, like with Quentin Tarantino and Nolan, though, it's like they just bank their name. It's like they're like, it's a Christopher Nolan movie, and it's like that's why you're able to get away with that.
Well, and that's the way it always used to be. Back in the day, you were sold on either generally the director or the actor because they had an original story. You didn't know what the movie was always going to be. Yeah. Like a great example is look at Bad Boys, the original Bad Boys. When that came out, it wasn't a huge hit, but it's funny now looking at it. It's so quaint in 1995 that Martin Lawrence gets top billing in that movie over Will Smith.
Yeah.
And Michael Bay was just this guy who was like a nobody. Yeah. And all the people involved were just like, this little thing, and how something like that can turn into a franchise. So, we see that all the time, how we get these great, look at John Wick's a great fucking example of something that was original and just spawn this great franchise. Even Matrix, like Matrix did a few years ago, but that's generally where a lot of these things now come from. But the problem you have is the studios, and they're always going to, now that they know that franchises sell and they see things like Marvel go up and up and up and up and up and up, to them, it makes more sense to want to try and go with that quick buck / safe buck. Right. Instead of trying too much new and interesting. But the upside of something that's new and interesting, as long as it's not something like Star Wars or Marvel, it's not going to cost as much to produce. So the chances of that happening are a lot higher now, like you were saying. And the other upside of that is the streaming aspect of things, both YouTube and Netflix for that example, because Netflix will spend money on production, but YouTube is almost like, I'm surprised we haven't had a new independent revolution with YouTube. I mean, it's sad because you see more people get sued over doing fan films instead of getting jobs. It seems like it's like you should be hiring these people to make these things instead of just suing them.
I know. Well, that's one of that's one of the things. A few days ago, I posted, I think on Midnight's Edge, I linked a person's original thing where it's like super science friends, where it was like super friends with like dead scientists, like Madame Curie and stuff.
Right.
And it's like, these are the people who should be getting. It's like you look at these, like these are the people who you should be getting out and doing this stuff with. Not, yeah, but the thing is, though, is I think with the reason with YouTube is because when they tried bringing out, famous YouTubers to do, like, for example, there was that, oh God, there was that one, a really annoying kid who had a Nickelodeon show.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name, but yeah, he did like 3 movies. Yeah, Fred or whatever.
Yeah, and there was like Hedberg or something like that. There's this one lady, Hedberg. She was hosting like a show on E, and she was like a General Marbles level YouTuber. And it's like, I think what it is that Hollywood doesn't know what to do with YouTube. Doesn't know what to do with with this talented YouTubers.
That's possible. But like you said, the other side of it is like I said, instead of hiring the guy who makes like a Batman versus Predator or whatever, they'll turn around and sue him, and that's not creating a good, look at a great example is like they used to get, I'm sure they still do it, but they have like these crews of guys who make like R2-D2s. Like that's what they do. They get together in conventions and they make R2-D2s. They build all these droids and shit. And they got so good at it that between making the original films and, obviously, and the prequels, George Lucas actually hired a lot of these guys to start working on the droids because they were doing a better job than the special effects guys.
Well, like the thing with, from what I understand, BB-8 was the same deal too. They got the same droid people. Those same droid people, and they use them to make BB-8.
Probably, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah,
it was like because it was a mix of like having him on a stick and making it CG, and him and an actual robot.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different versions. Like they have the puppet with the green sticks that they take out the puppeteer, and then I think they have one that's remote control that actually kind of works like it's supposed to.
Yeah,
but it's not as. I don't know what's different about it that they have to use the other one too, but yeah, I mean, I know
it was this terrain.
Yeah, that could be.
It didn't operate on. The only reason I know this is because I saw one of those guys at a convention once, and they had the BB-8, and they didn't turn it on because the floor wasn't that smooth. It needed to be a smooth floor.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I agree. I find it very frustrating because there's a lot of, well, what also sucked too is in around 2016, there was a lot of especially animators. You found a lot of them were like, dude, I can't afford to do this on YouTube. And it's like Ego Raptor, for example, that's when he switched to Game Grumps to just do video game playthroughs because he couldn't afford being an animator. And this other really psychedelic guy, which I can't think of his name right now, but yeah, no, I agree. And I've been studying for a while, different YouTube experts and stuff like that to try and do animation. That's why I kind of know a lot about it. But it seems like YouTube's very unfriendly to original content creators because it's like apparently you have to. It's like if you're not leeching off of them, if you're not leeching off of existing properties, then it's even harder to get noticed. But if you leech on existing properties, you'll likely get copyright struck.
Yeah, that's the fine line. And even if you do an original stuff, you're not always safe because I've heard a lot of times people who do like original 3D models for like Star Trek ships and stuff like that will even get nailed with stuff. Sometimes it's really strange.
No, but like original IP, not like doing like.
No, I know what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it's tougher to get that stuff out there. I mean. Yeah, I know. I tried for years and years and years to get my original IPs out there. I even tried doing some parody stuff just to kind of get some notice to my channel for my animation. And don't get me wrong, my animation is nothing special. My original stuff is extremely crude.
Yeah.
And the program I use now still to this day is very crude. I can't really do a lot of things that you can do.
Yeah.
A lot of work and knowledge and shit. So
you have my yeah, I am there with you. I've tried my best trying to like make animation that does not look like shit, or because there's like only so much one person can do without. But yeah, no, I understand. So, are there any questions you have? I can't think of any.
For you personally,
I don't know.
I mean, of course, you can just where are you from originally?
San Jose. My family my family was from Philly, and then they moved down here. But I've been pretty much born and raised in San Jose.
All right, so
yeah,
that's cool.
yeah. I live. Yeah, So basically, kind of like the distance between Gary from Nerdrotic, who lives in San Francisco. It's kind of like the distance between Philadelphia to New York City. That's about how much distance there is between us.
All right. I kind of have an idea. I mean, I don't get out too much, but
no, I know.
Roughly, I kind of have an idea. Yeah.
It's just the thing is in my experience, California is because people from the East Coast are so used to states being so small. It's like the scale of California is kind of hard to determine.
I can kind of understand. Where I come from, there's a lot of empty space, and it takes forever to get anywhere. So I totally understand that.
Yeah.
What do you do as far as not like without doxing yourself, but like what do you do?
No, it's fine. I don't mind doxing.
For a living normally then.
Well, currently I'm actually unemployed because I was a contractor. I was an analyst. I did analyst work, contracted for Google, and but my project ended kind of right before the beer virus came out, so I'm kind of out of a job.
That sucks.
But so I'm kind of in between jobs right now. But I'm sorry for kind of putting you on the spot asking questions. That's a horrible.
No, actually, I don't mind it at all. That's fine.
I just couldn't. It's like as much as I would love picking your brain, it's like I can't keep. It's like I can't think of anything right now, but I know like as soon as I go to bed, I'll think of like 3 different questions to ask.
Trust me, I've done enough interviews. I know what it's like. You do that. You either run out of questions and then it's like, oh, why didn't I ask this? And oh yeah, we've been there.
Yeah. Cool. But so like what I find kind of funny, and I have to be very careful because of an NDA, but is the thing is that Google isn't as algorithm based as people think. I actually the first contract job I did for Google, I was an analyst content, reviewing content for Google Play. I think I can say that. And I worked with people who did analyze content for YouTube.
All right, that's cool.
So it's actually a lot more. So the funny, like I've done I've done analyzing apps, and I've analyzed ads. Like I've done like 3 or 4 different things doing that. And what I found is that it's not so like the biggest misconception people have with YouTube and their other stuff is that they think, oh, it's they're going to hire a bunch of like purple haired people who are going to judge things who are going to just judge things from their own personal experience and stuff. No. There's very little of that. And when someone has to do that, they're terrified because there's some like they're very low paid, they're very underpaid workers who are just glad that they have a job at Google. So it's like they don't want to rock the boat. And
that's very interesting.
Yeah, so it's like it's Google legal. So what you'd be afraid of. To be honest, I'm hopefully not going to work. I'm hopefully not going to do a contract job for Google again. So I mean,
I wouldn't want you to break your NDA. So
yeah. No, I don't mind a little bit. Like I think I'm kind of like I'd be more secure. Like I'd be more worried if you were asking me like specific guidelines and stuff.
Right.
And that would be like 5 years old. But gotcha. Also another thing that's also should be known about YouTube or about Google period is that there's certain rules that they intentionally keep vague.
Well, that we kind of all figured out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean,
that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, because like I used to get annoyed because it was like they would be like, well, all right, they're expecting us to rate this thing, and these guidelines are completely inaccurate. These guidelines are completely contradictory. Can they like be more specific? And like, no, I was told by a trainer, it's like, no, they don't. They can't. They can't. They keep intentional so that they can easily worm their way out of it.
That sounds about right. And
yeah,
that
it's dumb because, in all honesty, like for YouTube, while there would probably be people who would abuse the system, that's just statistically. I mean, shit, they do that even now. If they were actually very clear with the audience about do's and don'ts, like kind of like broadcast standards and practices kind of deal. It's like most of the problems between, creators and YouTube and Google would easily be taken care of, because it's like there's a strict line for them to do.
Yeah, like I just said in the chat, though, I don't want to lead you into anything discussions. So
no. I understand. I'm being
don't want to get you in trouble.
No.
Off the air would be a different story.
So, no, it's fine. According to Christy, I'm actually am being like, I know it seems like I'm not being that careful. I'm like being willy-nilly, no pun intended, at all. But I'm actually being very careful. I actually am like choosing my words very, very carefully. And it's like, do it. And it's like the stuff I'm telling him, it's like, it's stuff where it's like, he can either figure it out, or it's like, it's not. Because you can, if you read like terms of service for like all the different Google stuff, you could probably figure out a good chunk of the rules.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's pretty obvious to see that a lot of their stuff is set up a certain way to where it's ambiguous on certain levels. And
yeah, exactly. And like the thing where it's like a more human aspect, it's like while that's necessarily a thing of like, oh, we kind of don't want people to know that, they also tell you publicly. It's publicly out there that analysts do look at their stuff. The analysts do look at the stuff and help track out.
Yeah, I can imagine it's something like saying you can only dive in water that's deeper than 5 feet. And then you look at the pool and it's like it starts off at 1 foot, but it only goes to 5 feet. So you're like, why did it just say no diving?
Exactly.
But no, we can't tell them they can't. We can't tell them they can't. But
exactly.
The rule is, as long as it's less than 5 feet, I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
And I hate to tell you this is pretty much across the board with all the tech companies. Apple, Facebook, everything. They work pretty much the same.
Oh yeah. It's a legal ease thing. I totally get it to a point.
Yeah. So like that's one of those things where it's like, because I always get frustrated because like I would see sometimes people who are kind of like, oh, I'm blaming these stupid people who review stuff because they choose their biases and stuff. And it's like, dude, they're getting paid hardly any to like they're getting paid below living wage.
Right. Well, I figured they outsourced a lot of this stuff to overseas. That was part of my thing. Was if anything, I'm not mad at them. The people who are doing it so much is Google and YouTube, because it's like they don't tell us why. That's my big beef.
Yeah, and that's I know, and that's the thing. It's like that you should take your ire out on Google, not on reviewers and stuff.
As far as I do personally, I can.
I know you're good.
Try to.
I know you're good.
Most of all, especially because I understand there's you guys, not you and personally, but you and other people on the other end of that, they're just doing their job. Exactly. And we totally understand the ambiguousness of the rules, and there's quite a few people that I know that totally get that, and Google's the bad guy. Let's get it.
Absolutely. Like, they absolutely are the bad. It's like that's one of those things where it's like, hey, don't that's why I personally am like willing to kind of like dip the toe in just to kind of get that out there. Like, hey, don't blame the workers.
Well, and to kind of go back to the conversation we kind of started. Well, not somewhat started off with, but that goes with. It would be so much easier for us. We would totally blame the studios and shit if these directors and producers and all this kind of stuff and actors would learn how to play the game properly and not blame the players, us, but blame the game, and that is the studios playing that game, and making the rules, not us. Don't blame the fans. That's I don't understand it. Not only that, how these companies can condone that, because let's face it, if I worked for Walmart And I walked out on the floor and said, all right, everybody, even though we're open 24 hours a day, I'm deciding I'm going home early. We're closing up. Get your shit. Get the fuck out. And then somebody complains about it. Like, you know what? I don't give a shit. You're just going to like it and deal with it. You should just be happy you get to shop at Walmart at all. Exactly. I'm not going to have a job the next day. You know?
Exactly. Well, what I find kind of funny is that is that kind of that lack of discipline. Because if film studios can be like really stringent on things of like NDAs and whatnot, it's kind of odd that they're not taking seriously this stuff that affects their brand. And the thing is, what's funny is like with like marketing things is that because using marketing brand marketing lingo is that technically fans are brand ambassadors or yes. brand evangelists.
I used to hear that term all the time. Was brand, yeah, the first one, yeah.
And it's like we're the ones, because like especially when the superhero movie boom that's now happened, there would always be like, oh hey, what's with like who the hell are these X-Men people? What these X people do? And like who, you know, they would have a person write an article of explaining X-Men to normies.
And that's kind of what YouTube does now. That's a great, yeah.
Exactly. YouTube's the great, like, I find so, I scratch my head at how Hollywood has not understood how powerful YouTube is at marketing.
They do to a point, but I think we're the thorn in their side. Look at like what Collider. That's a prime example. And you know, when, what was it? Christian Harloff, I think it was, who went off on his big rant, who kind of just basically blew the lid off of that whole thing. And I mean, we've had other people kind of come out and say, oh yeah, the Access Media totally gives positive reviews for Access. So don't think that the studios don't know this. They do. But what they don't want is somebody like us, not Midnight's Edge in general, but just, you know, the Phantom Menace, Midnight's Edge, and, you know, all these other people, Mr. H and stuff like that, who actually get out there and tell you the truth. That's what they don't want. Because especially when the truth makes them look bad, which generally it does. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that every movie and TV show has problems. Otherwise, we report on much more shit than we probably do. I mean, that's the one thing that people don't get about what we report. It's like we very, very rarely have somebody come to us and go, oh, this is going to be great. You can't wait to see this, blah, 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 and actually show us something and just get excited about it. You know, that very rarely happens. That's only happened with certain Conan things that never came to fruition, or
Dune, right?
In Dune, where Andre's been lucky enough to have an inside track there, because this is just a rare occasion where the inside track was excited and knew Andre was going to be personally excited about it.
Yeah.
And you know, that's just a rarity in this industry, though.
I'm kind of curious. So like those videos where you know, like for example, the Dune ones and the Conan ones, do you tend to get a lot of views from those? Did you tend to get as many views from those videos as you do, say, the Ghostbusters or the ones you negatively target?
Sometimes it depends, but no, on an average, generally not. No. Okay. Like I remember, like Andre's retrospective review of Conan did really well. Some of his other Conan videos in the past have done really well. Dune, on the other hand, is a much more niche fan base. But again, I think speaking back to just what you're saying, this is a good way of building that fan base up, because he is definitely a fan ambassador as far as Dune goes.
Absolutely.
And you know, him and a few other people who have gotten behind it, those are perfect people to have to get a lot of newbies on board to this universe. And that's what you want. You want people to be excited about it. You know, you want the Star Trek and Star Wars fans to be excited to get these new incomers. That's how you get new fans. And I think they forgot that in some ways. You're right. Even though they do use the media and stuff, the Access Media became more of their enemy, I think, in the end, but not in a sense from their point of view, but our point of view, in a sense that we don't trust the Access Media, but a lot of the viewers like you and other people trust Midnight's Edge and Nerdrotic and stuff like that to bring them a more, and Doomcock and stuff like that to bring them a more straightforward review, if anything. And you know, there's people who argue, well, we have bias up front, but I've pointed out many times where I have said I was not going to like something or thought I wasn't going to like something from a trailer, and I ended up enjoying it quite a bit. Joker being one of the more recent ones, where I thought I was just not gonna. I'm so sick of no Batman in my Batman stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I thoroughly enjoyed Joker. I have a few minor gripes with it, that are barely even worth mentioning. So I mean, like, it's very possible to surprise me, and that's the best kind of movies I love. Tom is very good with news. Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
There. No, I agree with you. Well, I think part of that problem with the access media is that the fact that they're not allowed to do criticisms. Because when you look at do you remember, you ever heard of Wizard magazine?
Yeah.
So like they used to rip to shreds bad comics, and it's like I guess they got a talking to, and then and when they stopped, they got neutered. And it's like people can tell when someone's balls get cut off.
It's disingenuous, and you can tell. That's why guys like Gary, especially in Doomcock, that's why people gravitate, especially to personalities like that, because you feel like you can trust somebody that's telling you the truth like that. Or, and it's not even so much the echo chamber business as a lot of people do, because there's tons of people within the community who don't agree on everything, and we have no problems with that. We'll rib each other once in a while on certain things, but for the most part, we have no issues. And I think that's another thing that drives them nuts, because they want to create these cliques and these arguments and the controversy, because that also gets clicks, and that also for them and gets stuff trending. That's another thing Well, don't you get a lot of hate views too? Like you get I noticed even on YouTube. Sure.
I know it's like no, your fan base is not a monolith, because you get people who hate watch you and they talk shit on Facebook.
Yeah, they'll talk on Facebook and in the comments, and I'm not saying that there isn't valid criticism from time to time. Sometimes it's very misinformed criticism in my opinion, and Andre's opinion, of course, and sometimes it's just nonsense bullshit.
Yeah, I will be honest. I know I am very ignorant to this in my respect from YouTube and stuff, but I mean, I always view it as criticism is always good. You could just filter out what is bullshit and what is valid. But to be honest,
to a point, yeah.
I have no room to talk. So
the only problem with that is you have this. This is why I say that. And normally I would totally agree with you 100%. Because you're right. In any criticism, there's valid points generally. That's, kind of what we are built on at Midnight's Edge. But just like those who think we appear to have a general bias going into certain things, it's pretty obvious when these people come in, because they show their bias. They puppet these nonsense lies that come from other Facebook groups, and I've seen them. I see where they originate. I even think I tracked down where the 4chan BS originated from as well. And that's the thing, is like, you'll get a lot of these people who come in puppeting these, you said this was going to be canceled, or you said this was going to happen. It's like, no, we said this. And not only that, before what we did really say, we said it was a rumor. So even though we didn't say what you said, you'll get that sometimes. And that's just something you subjectively can, say, no, you're wrong, or I'm sorry, you're mistaken. That's a little different though than general criticism though.
No, I understand that. Cause like, I'll be honest, there's times I've listened to you while at work, and it's like I have you on in the background, and it's like I sort of hear something you say, and then I hear later you contradict it, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right, you did say that. It's like I think a lot of people put on YouTube as like a background noise, and so they don't always catch that nuance. But I mean, at least the good thing is at least it's recorded there, and you can be like, here's the time mark. It's like if one was inclined, they'd be like, here's the time mark where I said this is this.
Right. And then that happens quite often, not just with me, but a lot of the YouTubers. And it's the misquotes. It's the fact that they miss when somebody says, oh, it's a rumor. And, we get accused of rumor mongering and stuff like that, or making stuff up. It's like, generally, if we're going to make something up, it would be like something to get a hell of a lot more clicks than that. Not only that, is, we never even said this was necessarily real or true. And we do take, and if somebody comes in with some counter, like we've had recently in our recent video where we bring it up, where we had somebody come in and said that no, some of our reporting didn't jive with what he had been told. Right. We couldn't necessarily verify that what he was being told was true. We just had to go by what we could verify as far as who he was and his position. And so we did, say, this is somebody who doesn't come from a source as close as we normally get. We weren't able to vent it, blah, blah, blah. A couple of things he said did get confirmed through our sources, but I wouldn't say confirmed as that's true. But but we've had some things he said were things that we had heard before or whatever were confirmed, or they couldn't deny per se after we ran these other things by him. So you'll have that. But the thing is with this whole thing is what really sucks is you'll get these guys who say, oh, you were wrong about everything. You're never right. It's like, no, you guys just really hang on one or two things that we may not have been exactly right on, or you're misrepresenting what you're saying. And not only that, we never get credit for the hundreds of other times we were right about something. You know what I mean? It's like, but that's anything in life.
I mean,
too, so.
like there was a couple things that you guys were right on, like early on, which no one bothered to redress. Like in Joker, the thing about the Thomas Wayne being kind of like a Donald Trump type character, and he's running for mayor. You guys reported that early on, and it was like that was one of the things that kind of kept me away from Joker. Honestly, like kind of kept me leery of Joker. I want to see it. I still haven't seen it. I want to see it, but and also the thing with the time travel stuff in Avenger Endgame. That's why I didn't bother seeing it in theaters, because I'm like, fuck time travel.
Well, yeah, and that's a good example, though. Sometimes also too of how we did get some things right on that, but it's also the point of view of where we get it from. So the person that gave it to us, it's safe to say now they were kind of an extra or whatever on the set through a certain portion. So all they seen it was from their point of view.
Right. And
when you're shooting a scene, a 10-second scene feels like forever when you're shooting it, because you shoot it from so many different angles, so many different things that don't wind up in the scene, all that kind of crap. Exactly. And it's there. It's definitely there. But the way it's handled is so nuanced compared to the shit we've seen, because it's so nuanced that some people are like, I don't see it. It's like, oh, it's there, but you have to look for it in a way that you're not normally used to seeing it, because it's actually handled in a way that you not only get to see Trump from the point of view of a lot of people who dislike him, but you also get to see Trump from the point of view of himself and those who do like him, because Thomas Wayne is misrepresented by the media in the movie, and that's the way a lot of people feel like Trump is represented. He's very misrepresented by the press and all that kind of stuff. And then you also have the other side of it. So it's very balanced. And that's another thing, whereas the SJWs just, they missed the boat on that one. If they wanted people not to go see that fucking movie, they should have just embraced the shit out of it. Instead, they told people not to go see it. Don't look at this. It's bad. It's nasty. It's going to get you killed.
Yeah.
What does that normally do for somebody?
Incentivizes it.
I want to see this more now. What am I not supposed to see?
Tantalizes it, and which is why I kind of was like, I'll be honest. When I heard the news things and stuff, it's like, they could have just easily not gotten this movie as big if they shut up.
Basically,
it's like, you're right. Everybody,
because going into the Joker movie, I don't even know if Warner Brothers was prepared for how big of a hit it was, because it wasn't necessarily getting the greatest of what I would call attention going into it, as far as even the fan community, because we're all like, well, why is this here? We don't need this. We don't want this. Right. It's like, you don't need a freaking Joker movie. What the hell asked for this? I
will say this: if Warner Brothers had any inkling of how big it would be, they would try to make more of a Batman connection.
I think you're right. I definitely think that's a very valid point too, in comparison with everything else too that's been brought up in the past. That's very true. I think they would have set it up for more of a sequelization or a spin-off situation, because that was the thing, that the reason Todd Phillips did what he did, the reason the movie was the way it was, and the way that Joaquin did it, and getting Joaquin to do the part was all predicated on the fact that this was going to be it, a one and done Elseworld thing, like a what if. No more, no less, kind of thing. Right. But now that they see the potential, you're right. And Hollywood always learns the wrong lessons. So
I have a question for you, Tom. Do you think Joker would have been as successful if it didn't have the branding of the Joker?
No. But it wouldn't have also been as successful as a Joker movie had it not been so good. So it's kind of a...
Needed both. It needed both.
Yeah, it's one of those perfect storms. There's no other way to explain that movie, because like I said, if that movie would have sucked at all, it would have just been another Birds of Prey, another Suicide Squad. Nobody would have cared, because Joker's one of those characters that people really give a shit about. And to the point where there's been times where Joker stuff has outsold Batman stuff for that.
Yes.
As far as that goes, especially during the 89 Batman movie. They were notoriously selling out of Joker stuff. I had to wait a long time on a list to get a Joker figure from Target or Kmart or whatever it was at the time that was close by, because they'd sold out of all the Joker. They're like, yeah, we're not getting any more till August. I'm like, no.
I want to ask you this, because I have a controversial opinion about a version of the Joker, and I want to know how well this point holds up. I actually didn't mind Jared Leto's Joker as much, because they were trying to make him basically as like a exaggeration of a cholo, and Joker started out as a crime boss. So they basically is like, they took a little bit of like the Dwazy crime bosses, made him look like a cholo with the like tattoos and everywhere and the grills in his teeth, to try and kind of play a part, beat you about the head that this is a crime boss.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. The problem with that is if you go with that, then they really should have gotten somebody like John Leguizamo or somebody who's culturally appropriate. But then they would have seen it as themselves, probably going too far with that, and you'd probably have a lot of people have issues with them changing the Joker's background like that, even though the Joker doesn't really have a background. But I wouldn't be against it so much if they would have cast it a little differently. I didn't have an issue with it because I just kind of kept it in the back of my mind so much more that this is not the Joker. This is Jason Todd or Tim Drake or something like that. I'm like, they're gonna reveal it at some point. I think that may have been their initial plan, to be honest with you. I think so too, but I mean,
there's a so I actually was rooting for the DCEU to be successful. And like, I kind of liked BVS. I liked Man of Steel, and I actually liked Justice League, but I was like, because there's certain questions and there's certain things, like because of BVS's failure, there are certain questions I was hoping they'd answer that they didn't. Oh, I don't know if you've heard this, but basically, I think this. You know how in Justice League they had the Unite the Seven, and they've only had 6. I think I know who the 7th one is. Because I remember around after, like, between Man of Steel and BVS, they showed a leaked image of the guy who played the general in a mocap suit, and I remember, and they were saying is that he might be Martian Manhunter.
Yeah, I think I heard that.
And then I saw another article where it was like in the deleted scene, they did actually explicitly state he was going to be Martian Manhunter.
Which I wouldn't have been against. I mean,
I would have been, yeah.
Personally, from my perspective, I understand fans that dig like Man of Steel, BBS, and so on. And I was never rooting for the DCEU to fail.
Oh, I know you weren't.
I actually, even though I didn't care for Man of Steel as a Superman movie, I was still like, okay, I'm gonna see what they do with this. The setup for BBS is there. If they do this correctly, it may not fix Man of Steel, but it'll definitely make it more palatable in the future and set up, Batman v Superman. And in the end, I did like Batman v Superman probably a little bit more than Man of Steel personally, but just the movie overall is garbage in my opinion. And that's my problem with it, is it's got a good movie mixed in with a whole lot of garbage.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And then Suicide Squad, I actually didn't hate nearly as much as most people, but that's just because that's probably the most like a movie and under 2 hours.
Yeah. Well, like with my girlfriend loved Suicide Squad. She loved Harley, which is the only reason why.
Yeah, I mean, she was good in it, and the cast was actually pretty good in Suicide Squad. That was the other plus. Not only that, I was happy that it wasn't shot in the dark.
Oh yeah, I liked El Diablo. He was like, to me, he was a good. It was nice seeing Will Smith acting like Will Smith. because I got kind of tired of him being like, I'm a serious actor. And I liked El Diablo because, you know, he actually had a really good arc. He had a good arc in the movie. But so like for me is like, even though I am like in comics, I'm more of a Marvel fan. I totally care. Like, I totally care about Batman. I would probably like, I'd be more okay of watching a meh to, well, I'll be honest. I'll be more willing to watch a meh or buy a meh Batman, because I bought meh Batmans, than a really good Marvel movie. Because it's Batman. I love Batman. I love Flash. It's like Superman. I remember as a kid dressing, you know, wearing the Superman pajamas and jumping off my sofa. You know, it's like they are characters that I more care about in instinctively. And it's like, when I saw Avengers, it's like I really just only cared about Robert Downey Jr. because I like Robert Downey.
And that's totally fair. That's totally fair. I mean,
it's like even now when I watch Endgame, I'm like, I don't care. It's like, oh, I like that person, but I don't care.
I felt the same way you did pretty much through like Man of Steel. Even I was willing to accept that to a point. Like I said, as long as they played it off right in BBS. BBS is kind of where I checked out with that.
No, I agree.
And just so you know where I'm coming from, as far as my favorite all-time comic book characters go or superheroes go, it's like Superman and Batman are 1 and 2. So I mean, right there's the DC advantage, and that was
right.
You know, that's the tough part about it. You know, with me is I just got this. I hate being a bitter fan about certain things, but it just gets to a point where it's just you can only do so much. And I do love the rallying around a Snyder cut. I do feel like he should be awarded that opportunity. I don't feel like it shouldn't have been taken out of his hands. I'm one of those, if you're gonna do a job, you finish it. Right. Whether it's whether it's what we expect or not, it doesn't matter. You at least they had a plan. Unlike Star Wars, they just had the plan changed on them midstream twice, or whatever.
I know.
So I can't take that away from them anyway.
No, I agree. Let me put where I'm coming from. I agree with you to an extent. It's just it's for me personally. There's certain it's like, I'll be honest, my favorite superheroes is Batman and Spider-Man, either 1 or 2. It depends on what day. But there's other ones I have like a certain, like I have a certain, they have a soft spot for. And it's like, for me, it's almost like, it was almost like when I saw Avengers, like wanting to see Spider-Man in Avengers. It's like, I wanted to see Spider-Man in Avengers because I have a soft spot for Spider-Man. And it's like, oh, you didn't get to see him. And like, Batman versus Superman is like, when I kept watching it the first time, I was like, oh, that's a bad choice that they made. Oh, that's a bad choice that they made. It's like, well, I like that, but yeah, I checked out. Like, I feel for you, because I was like that watching Spider-Man Homecoming. That broke my heart, to where it's like, I have not seen Spider-Man Far From Home, and I kind of don't want to.
I get that, and I understand where some people come from on the Spider-Man thing. I'm cool with it because we've had enough Spider-Man to this point where I don't mind the different take so much, as long as he's still pretty much Spider-Man at the core. Cool. But no, I totally understand where some people come from on that. Well,
like the thing for me, the reason why I get really frustrated with the MCU Spider-Man is that Spider-Man is Marvel's answer to Batman, and it's kind of like, Are you going to swap? Are you going to basically make Batman Superman simp? No. No, it's like, no, Batman's Batman. You that independent part of Spider-Man, that's a core part of his character. And what also kind of bugged me was the fact is that, all right, you just replaced Uncle Ben with Tony Stark. It's like, screw you guys. You have not done anything different.
To a point, I get what you're coming from, even though Uncle Ben is acknowledged.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
And, I don't think that he's in there as much as some people like to act like he is. But no, you're right to feel that way to a point. I mean, I totally get it. Like I said, I've seen enough of the regular Spider-Man that I'm okay with it. Yeah. I like the crossover universe. I like that they are kind of setting him up to be more of the leader, and I think that was kind of their plan, to have him be up in the front, and that's why they're getting rid of, not getting rid of, but they knew they weren't going to have Tony Stark forever. They knew they weren't going to have Captain America forever. Spider-Man's a much bigger name either way, but you got to establish him in this world. And, there's, again, I'm not going to come up with excuses for them.
No, it's fine.
But I have a feeling at least the original plan was to get him to that point where you're talking, but I'm not sure how that's going to work out with the animosity between Sony and Disney with everything. It's hard to say. That's the other problem with it is a lot of what's there is a result of that agreement. And as much as a lot of people love the classic version of Spider-Man, we've already seen that Sony has done nothing but screw it up more than they've done well. And that's my problem with it. And I mean, I didn't hate like Spider-Verse, but I didn't like Spider-Verse for a lot of the same reasons that a lot of people seem to dislike Homecoming. And that's just because the believability of that movie and I'm not even talking about the cross of the dimensions. I'm just talking about a lot of the shit like Aunt May having a bat cave and stuff like that just really took me out of it.
What's funny is because because of our mine and my girlfriend's background in animation, we were like we hated we hated how choppy and stuff.
I hate that too.
And so we were like, fuck this movie. Like even now I offer to put it on Netflix and she's like, nope. Fuck that shit, because I can't.
I will say the 3D is a little easier to watch because it doesn't. It helps separate things a little better, because I've tried watching it, with scenes on 2D, and then I've seen it in 3D in the theaters. When I saw it in the theater, I had to admit it was a much easier watch than watching like the trailers and other scenes and stuff. Because that choppy animation shit. But even the movie itself, a lot of people love it. I didn't. Yeah. Rob famously doesn't like it at all.
I know. I feel bad for Rob. Because I know people saying like, "Why did you feel that way, Rob?" I don't think that's like, and it's like, "Hey, man, I just said what I said. Like, leave it alone."
You got to see it from his perspective too. He sees all the shit we see and everything else, and he's like, "Why don't you fucking see it? Just because you like it doesn't mean it's not there."
Absolutely. That was like, I think I remember I sent you a video, you and Rob a video one time of explaining the animation of Spider-Man of Into the Spider-Verse, and it was like a lot of the stuff that you were, I think when you said it with me, you kind of agreed with me. It's like the stuff that that the YouTuber liked about it in the animation style, like the choppy animation, like 2D and all this other stuff, we hate it. And
pretty much, yeah. And I didn't mind the unalignment stuff so much, because I mean, I get it, they're trying to make it look like a comic, but after a while, like that was the problem Rob had. He's like, and Mecca did too, is like they're watching the 2D version in theaters and they're like, I feel like I should have 3D glasses on, because I feel like I'm watching something that's out of alignment because it's in 3D. Right. And that's totally, and I can see that too. And it's like, you could do that once in a while for a scene or a shot here and there, but through the whole entire movie, it gets distracting to me personally.
It's the same kind of like when people complain about movies being too dark. It's the same type of thing. It's like, well, it's one of those ones where you have to, it's maybe okay for some scenes, but you do need to balance it out. Like Shakespeare mixed in, pathos with humor. Like he'll have one scene where it's humorous and another scene someone dies.
Yeah, I'm an advocate of I hate dark movies, and I don't mean tone. I mean, like when you can't see shit unless it's meant to be that way, because that's not really making your movie dark and mean anything deep. All it's doing is just making it hard for the viewer to see and make them squint, because it's a bad choice. Because I look at it this way: most movies are seen from the mind's eye, so we should be able to see just about everything that the director wants us to see to a point, and our mind should allow us to see. And nowadays, there's no excuse. I used to have to hide things like wires and whatnot. That's a little different.
Yeah.
But, unless you're Michael Myers, I shouldn't have to squint to find you in the dark,
Well, yeah, I mean, and in all fairness too, a lot of those movies, their prime inspirations are film noir, and in film noir, they had, because of budget, shitty lighting.
Yeah, so, but it's more based on sharp contrast, though. You're right.
Exactly.
They should have took that away from it. Yeah.
That's the problem, is the stark contrast. That's what I was getting to, is the stark contrast. Because like German, like if you watch the cabinet of Dr. Caligari is like, now
Great
granted,
example, yeah,
exactly. Granted that they painted the backgrounds, but it's like a stark.
But they meant for it to look that way,
exactly. And it's like this. There's a high contrast area to it, so that you can see, so that the audience can see what's coming. You know what's meant to be seen.
Right, you're not impressing me by making it all dark and dreary. You know, I want to be able to see Batman. Yeah, I want it kind of to be that tone, but I want to be able to see what he's doing. Unless I'm not, unless you're having fun with the only, exceptions, like I said, would be like a Michael Myers example where you're trying to make him hide in the dark and then all of a sudden pop out of nowhere. That's a little different.
Yeah,
but for that to work,
But in those movies, though, his face is, since it's so like pure white, it's that you get that contrast.
Exactly. That's just what I was going to say. The difference, though, is when he pops out, you have to have that contrast there, or you lose the entire point of it. And then when you got movies like, I was going to call it Kenobi because I'm looking at Stig's name right now, but no, I meant Solo. Yeah. Solo is a prime example of a movie that did not need to have so much darkness to it. Like, that movie is so muddy and brown and you can't see anything. And I don't think he'll care because we're this far into this, so nobody will ever hear it, as far as like that'll get it back to Clint Howard probably. But even Clint Howard said that, I don't know why he went with that. That was the cinematographer's choice when I talked to Clint, because I was like, we didn't like how dark and dreary it was. Like, I didn't get that either.
I saw the the little preview at the Super Bowl that they had, and I was like, I kind of don't want to see this movie. Looking at, I'm like, I was hoping to have my mind changed because it's Star Wars, But it was like, I don't want to see this movie. I'm sad.
The only thing that might have saved it, and I don't even know if it could have, even with the story as it is, because the story's bad. The story's bad. Yeah. You haven't seen it, or have you?
I have not seen it, but
then you're not missing shit. Yeah.
No.
Well, the movie's bad. The story's bad. The acting's bad. The choices are bad, but even if that wasn't the case, if they would have just got Anthony Ingruber instead of the kid they got to play Han Solo, it would have been so much better.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think would have made it better, because I know like a common complaint with that was the fact it was a prequel. And it's like, if you just made Han Solo basically the man with no name, it would have been fine. It would have been a fine thing to do as a prequel. You didn't necessarily even need Chewbacca. You didn't need You probably even not necessarily need Lando. It'd just be like, it's an adventure before Star Wars. Yeah, he's alive, but you get to see Han Solo do Han Solo things.
Yeah, I mean, that was the biggest mistake of it too, is they give him an arc in this movie he shouldn't have had. And that's also a problem with making it a prequel too. Like, you're in a box. You know where you have to go. B, where they leave him in this movie isn't really where he should be per se. There's elements that are set up for him to be where he should be, but the actions that he takes are like, that ain't Han Solo like. Because when we meet him, he's a scoundrel. He's not out for anything other than himself and maybe Chewie, and that's it. He don't give a shit about nothing else. Other than the ship,
Well, there's it's floating around on YouTube, but there's like a deleted scene of where Luke, I think it was like Luke Skywalker first comes and meets Han Solo, and he's got like chicks in his arms and stuff. He's like, shoos them away. It's like, dude, Han Solo is a scout. He's a pimp. He's
exactly.
A he's like Shaft.
The only thing they did in that movie that I agreed with was they left him in a position where he could hate women, because this woman that he wasted 3 years of his life on basically ditches him.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing they leave us with at the end, where he could see where he'd be resistant to fall in love with Princess Leia. Yeah. Otherwise, every other action he makes no sense. Because I don't know if you care about spoilers or not.
No, I don't care.
Yeah, he ends up giving all the money that he gets to these the people that end up starting the rebellion. So here's the funny thing about it. So basically, Han Solo was the one who footed the bill for the rebellion. Does that sound right to you? No, he would have took the money and ran.
No, exactly.
And not only that, there's just so many stupid things that they should have done that, it's like, why did you do that anyway? But, there's just, you can't have a character like this and do what they did to it without expecting some kind of backlash. Not only that, nobody asked for it. There was no possibility of this being any kind of Joker. You know what I mean? Like, there's just nothing. There's no way in any positive outcome that this was ever going to find its audience in quotations.
It wasn't going to have an audience, period.
No, because you took the one specific character besides Luke or Leia that everybody said, don't fucking mess with. You know, he's the number one character that everybody loves, and you destroyed any goodwill with that, especially right after The Last Jedi. I mean, those two death punches was like an uppercut and a blow to the gut to Star Wars just before it fell to its knees with The Rise of Skywalker. Now, The Mandalorian's one last gasp. We don't know if it's going to get back up, though.
I don't know. I've heard rumors that they're like going to stop after season 2.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say right now with everything going on, but yeah.
I don't get why, if this is Disney, and the fact that it's a Disney thing, I especially don't know why, because Disney milks like they will like squeeze the udders to get like blood milk to try and get the last bit of milk from a cow.
Well, I think this is just one of the other ones cases where even though they don't want to admit defeat, but us, Midnight's Edge and Nerdrotic and Doomcock and Geeks and Gamers and World Class Ball, all of us were right about so much shit.
Oh yeah.
And I can't imagine the stories we're going to hear in a few years from now when the NDAs go bye-bye. But yeah, this was just one big clusterfuck.
I would not be surprised. Hear me now, quote me later. I would not be surprised if next year you start hearing John Boyega and Daisy Ridley talk all the like spill the beans on how horrible it was doing Star Wars.
Oh yeah, Boyega's already been dropping nuggets.
I know Boyega's been dropping nuggets.
The thing is, I wonder how many years they have to wait, because usually NDAs go 3 to 5 years at least. So it might be a few more years, but somebody's gonna write a book.
Oh yeah,
but if somebody's gonna drop some books, you'll have all kinds of shit. Like, I have a feeling we're gonna get very vindicated in a few years. It may take a little time, but
I think you will. I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass, but I really think you will get vindicated.
I too. Yeah.
The thing is that it's just so out there. That's the problem. It's just so much out there. It's like it's like you guys have to. They'll have to admit it.
Well, they kind of did when they admitted that the Phantom Menace was something that they took into consideration with The Rise of Skywalker. And granted, it was the same kind of a situation with Justice League. There's been no two situations that are more comparable to the other. And in both situations, they did exactly the wrong things, and that was they overcompensated.
Right.
Now, granted, Rise of Skywalker didn't overcompensate as much as Justice League did.
Maybe they learned from
Justice. Well, I think it was more so just you had a captain running the ship that's just a little bit more competent than Joss Whedon. I think that was the main thing right there.
Probably right.
Yeah, I mean, really, if you want, because let's face it, let's be honest, love or hate Marvel, the things that everybody bitches and gripes and says they hate about Marvel are Joss Whedonisms.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the thing that bothers me most, is because nobody really likes him. But as a Marvel fan, he's a bane of the fucking franchise, you know?
I agree with you, because I loved Iron Man. I actually liked Iron Man 2. I actually think I think the biggest problem with Iron Man 2 was the MCU, because they're like, oh, we have to stick in all these things of like to hint at the Avengers instead of focusing on the story between Vanko and Stark. But yeah, I agree with you. It's like, yeah, it is those Josh Whedonisms, and I'm not a big fan of Joss Whedon anyway. Like I will probably get hell, but I don't even like Firefly.
I'm not a huge fan of his. Yeah.
But yeah, you're probably
his best work to me was the original Buffy Vampire Slayer movie, and he don't even like that. So that tells you anything. He's one of those guys. I'll definitely say he's a better idea man than he is a director and a writer.
Yeah. Same. There's a lot. There's quite a few in Hollywood with it. Oh yeah, I'm like here. The quote: "The time this movie and actually Ant-Man were what kind of got me out of like watching every Marvel movie." Oops. Like Age of Ultron, because I got pissed off. Because like I got in arguments with people because it's like my thing is that they should not have killed Quicksilver. They should have killed the Hulk. Because in that one, when you're looking at that movie, he had a great enough arc where if you had him die a hero, it would have given his character something to go on instead of killing fucking Quicksilver, who had nothing. And then they get one of the best character actors, and they have him like just I can't believe I forgot his name. Ultron.
Oh,
Spader. James Spader.
Yeah, James Spader. I almost said Kevin Spacey for a second. Thank God I didn't. But now I did, so it don't matter.
It's all right. But it's like, yeah, and they underutilize him. It's like, James Spader.
Now you just did.
I know, man. You jinx me.
Well, there's so much alike. Like you could almost interswap them. That's the sad part. But yeah,
it's like because they cast like James Spader was a perfect foil for Robert Downey Jr. I mean, it's like it's like getting it's like getting Kevin Spacey and that blonde chick who's in Superman Returns and Beyond the Sea. It's like they work well together, and it's like you just basically wasted him in this one little thing.
I can't help it. I hate Kevin Spacey, but I love Beyond the Sea anyway. That's just off the cuff.
No, it's a good movie. It's an underrated movie. I would argue.
And he's great as Lex Luthor too. God damn it.
Yeah. I'll be honest though. Like a lot of people, what really pissed me off with going back to Man of Steel was the fact is that they had the easiest job in the world by having the guy who played Mark Zuckerberg be like a Mark Zuckerberg as Lex Luthor. And yes, Tyler, Kate Bosworth. I just forgot her name.
Yeah, I was trying to think of it too. Yeah.
She was like in 3. She was in 21, Beyond the Sea, and Superman Returns with Kevin Spacey.
Even though I hate her as Lois.
Yeah, no, she was kind of.
Yeah, I mean they're well together. That's one of the best scenes in the movie, though. When she's like, "Come on," he's like, "Come on, say it." Wrong.
Yeah,
I love that bit.
I liked him as Lex Luthor, but I was really mad that they did not, because they had this thing with what's his name, the guy who played Zuckerberg.
Oh, I always think of Zuckerberg too. Jesse Eisenberg.
They had like a perfect set. They had like a perfect thing of like, oh, okay, so instead of Lex Luthor being kind of like a Donald Trump type character, like when
Spacey.
When John Byrne rebooted him from Man of Steel comics, and that carried over to like Clancy Brown with Lex Luthor, and or bringing back the Gene Hackman with like Kevin Spacey and stuff. It's like, oh, okay, you make him like Mark Zuckerberg. That makes sense. But then they made him like, they took all the like, they didn't make him like a Mark Zuckerberg. They just made him like, what's that guy's name? They just make him like Max Landis. And it's like, fuck, dude, no. Just make him like Mark Zuckerberg. Just make him like a stuck-up dude, bro, like Mark Zuckerberg, who like built their company and stuff. Who's like, I give you the minimum effort. I give you the minimum of attention. It's like, if you made him like that, and it was like that was your Lex Luthor, it would have actually made him seem credible.
Well, that, or at least they should have had, at least in my opinion, they should have had him, since they set him up as Lex Luthor Jr. instead of Lex Luthor, they should have had another Lex set up in a sense to where he was around, and then you could understand why this Junior was the way he was. But outside of that, they missed the opportunity of having him be the Riddler. That was the thing that bothered me. Is like, you could have Jesse Eisenberg play the Riddler.
I wouldn't want him as a Riddler. I mean, I'll be honest. It's like,
or even maybe the Scarecrow. I don't know.
Yeah, Scarecrow. That would have been cool. Because like, it's like the problem with me is like, well, I'll be honest. I don't this new guy playing Riddler. This Dano, something.
Paul Dano.
Yeah, like. I haven't seen anything he's in, so I don't have that frame of reference. But it's like
he's all right.
For me, it's like outside of Frank Gorshin, the best version of the Riddler is John Glover from Batman the Animated Series. Not like the New Adventures where he wore the spandex, but no, like him in that animated.
Yeah, I know
series.
the one you're talking about.
Yeah,
I liked Jim Carrey's because he kind of did a Frank Gorshin on crack. And I think that he just went to that fucking extreme with it. But no, the Riddler's always been kind of one of those Batman characters that he's a popular villain, but he's kind of had a soft spot for me. Like after the Joker, he's my next favorite villain. And it's just because of his.
After Penguin, he's mine. He's my next favorite.
I love the Penguin, but only reason I like the Penguin now more so than I used to is because of Danny DeVito's version, and I know that's not the more.
That's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, I think there's things about Batman Returns that are very underrated, but then again, there's a lot of things about Batman Returns that are batshit crazy, pun intended.
The thing is, what I find with the problem with Riddler is that you have a lot of writers who they don't understand of how to write him in a way that would work aside from just here's a riddle, Batman solves it. Here's a riddle, Batman solves it. And
no, I get it. Yeah.
Bruce Timm said that was their biggest problem with writing the Riddler for the Batman the Animated Series was it just they didn't want to make it like the Frank Gorshin one where it's like here, solve the riddle, like here's a riddle, solve it. Here's a riddle, solve it. But it's like I liked that fact that he's like they basically made him a hacker. It's like they basically made him this crazy hacker.
I don't know if I'd really. I mean, I that's all right, but I mean, I like that he's like almost an intellectual superior to Batman in a way.
Yeah. I'll be honest.
The aspect that I like about it in a sense that he's intellectually superior in almost every way, but he's such a fucking narcissist that is his downfall. And if it wasn't for that, he probably could be smarter than Batman or better than Batman in a lot of ways.
I'll be honest. Granted, it's my own headcanon, but I think I think Batman's smarter than Riddler. True. He is. And narcissism gets in his way, but I think Penguin's smarter than Batman.
Yes. In some instances, you probably are right. I love how in Batman Returns they kind of set up the whole aspect of that Bruce Wayne was Gotham's golden son and Oswald Cobblepot was the trash they threw in the sewer. And I love the dynamic. I love him taking on the city. I love him being taking on being the mayor and all that. That is such a great story arc. And they even did that back in the comics and in the TV show from my memory too. They had one where he ran for mayor, but I just loved that deformed version of the Penguin we got from Tim Burton.
I do too. Oh, I mean, the reason why I always liked Penguin was to me, he seemed to match Batman tech for tech more than even the Joker.
The techie one, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like if Batman is supposed to be the tech guy, the tech superhero, then of course Riddler. Of course, the most tech villain definitely has to have a place in there.
Oh yeah, well he's definitely my top.
Yeah, that's why I always liked. I'll be honest. That's why I always liked Pink. I always liked the intellectual guys, and I always thought it wasn't until Dark Knight till I kind of liked Joker, but it was like that was my whole reason for liking him, because it's like, well, no, he can match him tech for tech. It's like anything Batman can whip up, he can whip up better.
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, yeah, totally, and that's one of the reasons why I love Batman Returns. And then they did, even though if you like Batman Forever or not, whether you like Jim Carrey's performance or not, I think they nailed the Riddler so well in Batman Forever, in my opinion.
Yeah, no.
That he was, because they didn't just give him a lot of he had a lot more going on in that too. And I loved how he had the box. That was cool, you know, and shit like that. And he craved the knowledge, and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I think there's the two problems I've had with the Riddler and in Batman Forever. And I know they're so minor that I probably should let it go. Is that number one is the part where he's like, no, don't tell him, he won't learn anything. It's like, why are you doing that, man? Just to be like, hey, no, stop. And then the next thing was I remember when I was a kid, when that movie came out, there was this little magazine called Disney Adventures, and they were talking about
I had that.
Yeah, they're talking about the movie, and he had this thing where it was like he would open up any lock, and he used it in to open up the Batcave lock. And I'll be honest, when I imagined it in my head, what it would be it was completely, it was something more of like, oh, he sticks like the bottom, he sticks this little thing in his cane, hits electrocuted, and it like magnets or whatever, like fucking opens up the lock. But instead it's like some weird glowy thingy, and I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I wonder if they didn't establish that well enough, because I do remember that end that was in the novel a little better too. And I know there's a version of that movie, they should redo it and recut it, that's much better than what I've heard. Between the graphic or the graphic novel or the comic adaptation, whatever you want to call it, the novel itself, and the deleted scenes, the original screenplay that's people have gotten hold of, that movie was much darker and better than it was when we finally what we finally got. And as much as I love Tommy Lee Jones, Billy D. Williams got so raped on that situation. He should have been Two-Face. I hated Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face. He did not understand the character. He was not in the right mindset.
He tried to out-camp Jim Carrey. It's like, you can't.
That was the other problem. Is those two had zero fucking chemistry at all, and you can tell that the stories that have emerged since then because they couldn't stand each other, and it shows. It definitely shows on screen. And
there's one I kicked myself to this very day, because there's one time I actually got to meet Billy D. Williams at a comic book convention. And that was one of those questions where I always, because I heard in an interview, it's like, oh yeah, I wanted to play Two-Face, and I was thinking of some cool ways of doing Two-Face. And it's like, I wish I knew what it would be, because that would sound fucking cool. Is Billy?
Well, yeah, because it would have been whatever Tim Burton was originally kind of planning on, because that was where he was actually pre-thinking things through, and that's where I said it was the first time really where Tim Burton took into consideration, if this works, they're going to want to do another one. So I'm going to set this up. And Robin was always one of those things. Well, if we don't do it in this one, we're going to do it in the next one.
Right. Sorry, good.
No, that's what I was going to say. So yeah, he totally had that planned out from the start, and to the point where he actually was contractually on board to do it, that they had to pay him because he wasn't in the movie, because he actually had a contract to be in the movie. Yeah.
It was the Batman DVD. I don't know if it's in the Blu-ray, but there was this little scene where it
got carried over,
storyboard of where it would have Robin, and it was weird. It felt really tacked on. It felt like some weird thing, but it was like Robin wasn't a big deal. He was just in that little scene, but it's like they showed the storyboard from the first movie of what Robin would be.
Yeah, because they were going to set Robin up in the first movie, but they said, no, it's too much. We'll save it for the sequel. Then it didn't happen in the sequel. And then he's like, well, we'll just put it all in the third film. Well, then, like, I'm sure if you've seen those things that Tim Burton said, he's like, we started talking about the third movie, and about an hour into the conversation, I'm like, you guys don't want me to make this movie, do you?
Yeah. Oh, I know. I felt bad because, like, I love Tim. I like those two movies, Batman and Batman Returns. They are in my top 5 favorite movies of all time.
I mean, I love them to death. I mean, they're totally not. If you really want to get into the like, oh, that's not a superhero, especially how I bitch about Man of Steel. I'm a little hypocritical, but yeah, that is so many bits in there that are not Batman, but it is Batman. It's so like, yeah, I forgive it because of the nostalgia factor too.
Well, I mean, here's the thing I've noticed is that when I've talked to a lot of people, and most people's introduction into comics wasn't like through, was basically through other media, and then they got into comics. And so it's like a lot of people, like that's how people get into comics, is through TV and cartoons and stuff. And so it's like, yeah, of course. It's like, now granted, my first thing of Batman was Adam West, but it was like one of my early things to get into comics and to order the Superman. So it's like, to me, it's
friends. Yeah.
It's like, so to me, it's like, that makes total sense with Batman, especially after seeing Batman, the animated series, and seeing how people think, oh, this is a lot like the character. And it's like, well, he's not that different from the movie Batman's. So that's why.
No, but what I'm saying is I can sit here and rip them apart a little bit. Like, okay, here you go. Batman wouldn't kill anybody. We all know that. I know. I'm just saying. Yeah, I get it. In the movies, it's a different situation. We've never heard him say, "I don't kill." That's something that's specific to the comics. Granted, okay.
Go ahead. Sorry, I'll go ahead.
No. I get it. I love the movie. Don't get me wrong. I love the movie, but I'm going to be fair to it. I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I'll rip it apart too.
That's why I hate the Dark Knight ones, the Christopher Nolan
Joker
ones.
shouldn't be Jack Napier, at least in a sense that that's the same guy that killed Batman's parents, because the whole point of that is that Batman can't get the killer of his parents, because that's what drives him, is he'll never be able to fulfill that lost space inside of him. So him having that resolution at the end of Batman is stupid.
I agree.
You know, there's all kinds of little things I can pick around, you know, but no, I love the movies overall just because, like you said, it was cool. They're great. They got some cool moments, and yeah, they're not like the comics exactly, but they were a gateway to comics for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And sure, a lot of the cliches that we kind of hang up on Batman, or rules that we hang up on Batman, come from, you know, various comics, and they don't always ring true to whatever comic. But, you know, overall, we kind of have like I kind of like with Superman too. We all overall kind of have an idea of how these characters should be handled, though. Right. I mean, I think that's the overall thing that you were kind of getting to before too.
I agree with this. Like, I've said this around when like Sherlock first came out, is that there's certain things where it's like Sherlock, that series, it does not follow the books exactly, but it gets the character's core. And it's like every popular character, there's a certain thing of what is A. There's certain things that make this character. And then there's certain things that don't. The reason I didn't like the Dark Knight trilogy was because but one of the reasons I didn't like it is that they hammered home, is like, Batman doesn't kill, yet he kills Ra's al Ghul, yet he kills Two-Face. It's like,
well, to be fair, the Ra's al Ghul thing is the only one I'll kind of give you, because he's like, I don't have to save you. Like, well, you still killed him.
He still killed Two-Face.
But Two-Face, he owns it up to, though. That's the thing, is he takes the blame for that. And I don't agree with necessarily how he does it, because it is kind of underhanded, but I love the Dark Knight movie itself. I'm not as big of a fan of Batman Begins, and I don't really like the Rise one at all. Like, I've only seen it once, and I've not watched it again since.
So like with like Dark Knight, because like around that time I was doing comics, and I was trying to.
Twice I lied. I've seen it in theater and I've seen it in video. My bad.
Right. No, it's fine. I'm not gonna hold, like, you hypocrite liar.
No, but I'm like, I only watched it once. No, it was twice.
No, it's fine. But it's like, that was a good comic book. It's like the internet killed the Dark Knight for me, because they were like, oh, this, like, Heath Ledger's the craziest thing ever. And it's like, no, it's not. He's not really the Joker. He's got a few things like the Joker, but he's not really like the Joker. He doesn't have,
outside of the look wise, I would argue he's the only one that I've seen that's the most like the Joker. And that's just my personal opinion.
No, I know.
But that's because of two things mainly, and that's because I love they give him the multiple choice backgrounds. And Joker, everything's a fucking joke to him, and he's all about making everybody a hypocrite. And so those are the few things that they understood, I think, at least, about the Joker, that make this version of the Joker on screen the closest to the iteration that I've known all my life, anyway.
Okay, no, that's fair. I know that's fair. I've had this argument with so many people for many years, so it's like I understand. I'm in the minority for it, but I'm not a big fan of the Dark Knight. Was like an okay movie.
I can see like a point of view where people are like, it's not the fanciful Batman kind of, in a way. It's not the. Yeah, it's not the. It's a very grounded, very.
Yeah. It's a very good crime movie, and it is, and Heath Ledger is a very good cinematic villain. Like, if you put him like up in the top 5 of the like AMC's greatest film villains, I'd agree. But it's just one of those things where there's certain things that make Joker, just like there's certain things that make Batman, and it's like, well, you can play fast and loose with some things, but there's certain other things where you kind of need the Joker to be the Joker, and one of his things was the gimmicks. It's like, just like how Batman has all this shit in his utility belt, Joker has to have a bunch of shit. He has to have the weird gags like the buzzer and stuff like that. That's just part of who he is. It's like Batman with his utility belt. But
okay, that I can. That's one thing I guess I can see a point of view. I'm trying to think, like, yeah,
No,
I mean, he kind of has. Oh, here's where I see they kind of worked around that. Instead of him having like the acid flower, he did the pencil trick.
yeah.
Instead of him,
Yeah.
instead of him having some other kind of contraption, he set up the whole bomb thing at the end. But I can see where you're coming from.
No,
Now, granted, to be fair, my favorite Joker of all time still Jack Nicholson. It's going to take a while before somebody can top that. But
yeah, I agree. But yeah, that's my reasoning why. It's just like there's certain it like, well, I know a lot of people there it's like I've noticed a lot of people with their reasoning for Joker is that it's like they look at the Killing Joke. As they look at the Killing Joke, it's like this is why this is Joker, and through the Killing Joke instead of other stuff. Like, and I'll be honest too. Actually, the Heath Ledger Joker is more like Joker's first appearance in Batman 1, where he's not so much the trickster type character. He's just this very like creepy clown who's just outsmarts the cops and outsmarts Batman. So I mean, I will give him that. I will give him that. But it's like there's like Joker's 5-Way Revenge and stuff like that. He's more like the Jack Nicholson one than Heath Ledger. It's like, but that's my opinion.
Well, I have my issues with the Jack Nicholson one. I like his portrayal, but he's got too much motivation. The Joker's not generally motivated. Like he makes plans like the Riddler kind of would, in a way. Like there's certain things that are aspects of him that are just too calculated for the Joker.
Okay.
And too how do I put this? Like the whole Vicky Vale bit and stuff like that. He wouldn't. The Joker doesn't work like that in certain ways. But he got the whole attitude right. He got the whole, I'm glad you're dead bit. That scene's totally Joker.
Oh hell yeah.
There's so many bits in there that are Joker, don't get me wrong, but there's just certain little bits, like he would not have certain motivations that he had in that movie because they made him a little too cliche bad guy in that.
Yeah, no, I understand.
It just to where that's where I think the Heath Ledger's Joker got a little bit better as far as closer to what the Joker really stands for, in that sense of everything's a joke, nothing is off limits, and I'm going to make you a hypocrite. Because you think I'm a hypocrite for thinking that everything's a joke or whatever reason he gives you at that moment in time. And the fact that they don't give him a background is the best part. Because I hate giving the Joker a backstory. It takes away the it's just like in most horror movies, when you give too much away about the monster, it makes them less scary. You start to empathize too much with the character. Okay. Once you empathize with the Joker, that was my problem going into the newer Joker. I'm going to empathize with this character too much, and luckily they played it on that line of that thin razor line to where I didn't, and because you still dislike the character enough by the end of the movie where you're like, oh yeah, that's the Joker. Because that's the thing is, as much as you love to laugh along with him, it's like, did that dude just like fucking kill a baby? Like, that's like the Joker with
in the movie?
No, not in the movie, but he's done it in the comics and shit before. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, like that's the thing with the Joker. Like, he's totally like, one of those guys that you're like, go get him. Because he's like, you're on his side for one thing, but then like, wait a minute, did that motherfucker just do what I think he did? Whoa. Because that's the thing is he'll make you a hypocrite for getting into whatever he's doing.
Right.
Like that's his whole thing. It's like, oh, you think it's great that I killed this guy? Well, guess what? I'm going to kill your wife because you thought it was funny that I killed this other, that's his whole thing. He has no motivation other than that. He lives from moment to moment in that crazy disconnected way. And the only thing that he really has anything that really drives him is that he wants to make Batman a fucking hypocrite too.
Yeah.
He wants to drag Batman down to their level. He knows Batman's no better than him. That's his whole kind of, or at least that's what he wants to prove anyway. Right. And in a lot of ways, he's right, because Batman is off the fucking chain. He shouldn't be doing half the shit he's doing. Fucking Bruce Wayne is just as psychotic as most of the people he fights. That's kind of the whole, dynamic of the story. Yeah.
Well, like one of the few things I actually liked about BVS, getting back to that, was the fact is that they before, like leading up to the film, they said they wanted to make him kind of like they wanted to make Batman a philosophical counterpoint, just like Joker was in The Dark Knight. And in Batman vs Superman, they got to the edge, but they didn't like dip their toe in the fact of like Batman being a bad guy. It's like the extended cut totally. It's like in the theatrical cut they kind of dipped their toe in, but in the extended cut they kind of like pussed out on making him a bad. It's like, because like Batman was actually a bad guy, and if you think about it, it's like, yeah, you're right. Batman is really close to being like lawful evil.
He is. Well, that's the one thing that I will agree with you that the Dark Knight movies didn't get, was they made Batman too much of a goody two shoes. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that the Tim Burton Batman's told, like that's what Tim Burton embraced about Batman, is that this motherfucker should be in jail, probably a psych ward actually, but he's just as crazy as the fuckers he's fighting. But just because he's doing the right thing or saving people, we look the other way, or we root for him, or generally he, because he has whatever moral high ground to stand on. But otherwise, the if you stop and just look at what he's doing, motherfucker's crazy.
Absolutely. And the thing is like the idea of Batman like torturing his like, when he gets older and bitter and stuff, he starts like torturing the suspects he brings in. That totally would make sense with how Batman is portrayed in a lot of iterations. And like the fact he like brands his prisoners is like, oh hell, it's like, are you telling me? Because like if Dark Knight, I don't know if you've ever heard this, like how they say it's in Dark Knight is a 9/11 allegory for the Bush era. I've
heard that, and I see some comparisons.
But it's like, well, if that's true, then yeah, he could totally torture and brand his opponents. It's like, no shit, he would, especially if he's like old and tired and doesn't give a shit.
Well, that's one of the things I loved about the BVS version of Batman was the Frank Miller Dark Knight.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I'm glad
they nailed that aspect. And that's one thing I said. If anything, Zack Snyder should have been making Batman movies. They shouldn't have let him anywhere near Superman.
I agree. No, I agree.
And if they'd have gave us a Dark Knight movie with Ben Affleck, and I'd have been
especially after Watchmen. It's like, especially after seeing Watchmen. And I'll be honest, I am not an Alan Moore fan, but I did like Watchmen. And I'm like, yeah, like, why are you doing Superman, dude?
And it wouldn't even have to be exactly like, because some bits of the Frank Miller Dark Knight comic are a bit batshit crazy.
Yeah.
And then the second book is not that good. So like there's bits and pieces you can pick out of there. But that I would have totally been on board, because that's one of those aspects, you know what? Where you kind of, the thing we were saying about Spider-Man, it's like we've had a lot of Spider-Mans, but we've also had a lot of Batmans too. We don't need to see the Waynes killed all the damn time. I am serious when I say, it's not even a joke anymore when I say the Waynes have been killed on screen almost as many times as Dracula at this point, and he's probably number one. If you stop to think of fictional characters that have been killed on screen, the only person who's probably beat those two has got to be Dracula. So that's it. Outside of that, Hollywood's got it in for the fucking Waynes, man.
I know.
They killed him twice in the Burton set, even though Burton didn't direct it the second time. But I'm saying, because they showed it twice.
Yeah.
And then we got to see it again in Batman Begins, and then we got to see it again in Batman vs Superman, and
I think the reason why is because like if you Google like Batman and stuff, you'll see like when you see that it's like a lot of artists really make that scene just look visually cool. Like Batman Year One is like David Machinelli. It's like, oh man, he did a really great rendering of Bruce Wayne.
That's the thing though. It's almost like that's low hanging fruit in a way though. Yeah. At this point, and that's one of my gripes with the Joker movie. I said, first of all, I'll be upset if we see the Waynes get killed. Secondly, I'll be even more upset if it's by the Joker. So at least one of those things were right.
Yeah.
I was like, they could have just let him live it. We know what's going to happen. You didn't have to show that yet. Mm-hmm. That could have just been something we know is going to happen down the road soon, very soon. But that's one aspect where I'm sick. That was one of the times I missed mentioning, because I've been killed on screen that many goddamn times now.
I agree. I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. But it's just, there's certain story beats where you kind of don't need to go into it anymore.
That's what I'm saying. I mean,
and
that's where I was saying I would have loved to just, and they kind of did, but they still had to show it. But I would have loved to have just kicked off with a Batman movie. We don't have to see any more of it. We don't need to. We already know the story. Everybody does. Yeah. Sure, you can allude to it at certain points when it's relevant, but that was kind of like the most they ever did in the Adam West Batman was like, I think they brought it up once in the entire series.
In the pilot.
Yeah, because he's like, yeah, my parents were tragically killed by a robber.
Yeah, I got that shit on Blu-ray.
At gunpoint. Yeah, I got it too, but
well, like that's the same thing. Like why I really liked about Homecoming and even Civil War is that they just basically alluded to it. But that's why I got so mad that they basically made Tony Stark like Uncle Ben.
But see, that's one of the reasons why I liked it though, because we didn't have to see Uncle Ben die.
I'm happy about that, but it's like the fact that I just got mad about the fact that they just basically swapped him out for Iron Man. That got on.
Yes and no. I can see on the surface somebody seeing that, but if you actually watch the movie, Ben does have a presence, and they do talk about him a little bit more, I believe, in Far From Home.
Okay.
And of course, he does equate the loss. It's more like I see it more of an equation of a loss. Like he already lost Uncle Ben, and that's what made him be Spider-Man. But now he lost Iron Man and Tony Stark, which made him want to be a hero, which I think is one thing that people miss out, I think, in that movie, because it is kind of right in your face because you haven't seen it. But like in the beginning of the movie, he's avoiding being Spider-Man quite a bit. Like that's kind of the whole bit of the whole thing is he doesn't even want to take his costume with him because he just doesn't want to be Spider-Man anymore because he doesn't think he's going to be good enough without Tony.
Probably gonna have to watch that movie.
And it kind of plays with that a little bit more to where I get where people are coming from though. I totally understand it because in the comics I know they're not that close and all that shit.
Oh, that's not even that. That's not even that either. It's just the fact is that it like my problem is that one of the things that makes Spider-Man is the fact is that he's like a YouTuber. He learned it's like how YouTubers learn about film production while producing film. Granted, it's a little short video, but it's like that's Spider-Man when it comes to a superhero. Is that it's like whereas Superman was born with this stuff and Batman was like went several years in training, he had to learn it on the fly and kind of just taking it and it's like I'm gonna give you magical toys. It's kind of like just to kind of
I get that, and but at the same time, that's kind of what Homecoming was about. And I don't know if you got that from the movie or not, but it was kind of like yeah, you've got these powers now, kid, but I'm going to take them away because you're not ready, because you still got a lot to learn. Mm-hmm. And the big learning process is throughout an Infinity War Endgame into Far From Home, and now he's becoming more of a Spider-Man as opposed to just being your friendly neighborhood Spider Boy kind of thing. Which I kind of like that transition to a point, and I hope they play that up quite a bit more in the next few movies. I agree where people are coming from in certain aspects, but I think if you look a little bit below the surface layers, there's still a lot of Spider-Man there to love. I don't want to change your mind on it, of course. That's your call. I actually didn't like Far From Home as much as I did Homecoming, but that was just because of the villain.
I loved Michael Keaton. I like Michael Keaton's one of my favorite actors, so that was actually like one of the things that made Homecoming really bearable.
Yeah, that's one thing it's missing because he was so much better as a villain. I didn't like what they did with Mysterio as much because they play it up too obvious that he, who he is. The end gets a little convoluted. It saves itself in the last moments. But
I read the plot. It's like, I will say this though. You're making me in a way break my embargo on MCU films where I have to see now Infinity War and probably Far From Home.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, Endgame, you said you've seen Endgame, but you haven't seen Infinity War?
I didn't
see Infinity War was 10 times better than Endgame. I like Endgame, but Infinity War is so much more.
I didn't want to see either of them. I didn't see so I had, for the most part, an embargo set on ever since Ant-Man on Marvel movies with few exceptions. And my few exceptions was Doctor Strange, because I like Benedict Cumberbatch and the character's interesting. Black Panther, because he was actually Black Panther until like all the political shit, because he's actually my second favorite Marvel guy. Like, I really like Black Panther.
Well, at least the political stuff isn't in the movie so much, but yeah, I get you.
Well, yeah.
It is, but it makes sense within the story. I get what you're saying. Yeah.
And Spider-Man Homecoming. Those are my exceptions. And then I got kind of really soured by
Well, Captain Marvel is a piece of shit.
Oh, it is a piece of shit. Oh, God.
I'll totally admit that. Like, I ain't gonna, as much as a Marvel, I'm not really even a Marvel boy. The thing is this, and I can understand, and I totally am more understanding of people's criticisms of Spider-Man when it comes to the MCU than some of the other stuff, because the difference is we've grown up with Spider-Man. Just like we grew up with Batman, just like we grew up with Superman. We know these characters, we know what they're supposed to be. The MCU on the other hand is only half the age of most of the DC superheroes. And on top of that, we haven't been inundated with them as much. So It's easier for me to accept a little bit alternate version or a different take, or I love some of the things they've done with certain characters in the MCU, even though I know they're not quite and I got friends that are fucking purists to the point where they damn near hate every bit of the MCU.
Yeah, no, I would never. No, it's like, because I'll be honest, there's like I'll just dip my toe in a little bit. I'm not even that bad, because like my brother's more of a purist, but like there's certain things where I'm like, you gotta give it some room. But yeah, anyway, as you were saying, sorry.
No. I'm just trying to give you some kind of reassurance that you're totally justified in however you feel, and don't make me change your mind. But if you revisit something and you see something you didn't there before that I may have pointed you out to, great. That's what I like to do.
Well, no, there's certain no. See, way I view it is like this. It's like you hold a view, and then your friend tells you something. Friend brings up some good points, and you're like, got a good point. And if you're honest with yourself, you'll be like, all right, I'll give this a fair shake. Yep. And so that's it.
And I've had it both ways too. Like, I used to have no issues with Rogue One until a few friends had pointed out a few things about that. I'm like, you know what? You're freaking right. It's like, damn it, but still.
Rogue One is a near perfect movie, except for, well, maybe not necessarily one thing, but like one big thing that makes me really not like that movie. And that's Darth Vader going ape shit. Because if Darth Vader was able to go ape shit in a fucking space, like at a fucking space tunnel thing, and get the plans there, how come he didn't decimate those soldiers back in Star Wars, Star Wars, like A New Hope? That's
the thing that people started pointing out to me, and things about how just in contrast, how he's treated in the beginning of A New Hope. It's like, that doesn't ring true to what he's acting like there. Now, if this was like right after episode 3, different story. A couple of years after episode 3, when he's in his prime still, first, that'd be a different story. Now we're 20 years down the line. He's treated like he's a relic. He's obviously nothing more than the Emperor's old muscle. They don't give a shit about. They don't even believe in the Force anymore. That's what I'm saying. Like, they treat him like he's a joke. And I can't imagine. And I totally get that's exactly what kind of brought me to that. Because before that, I loved the movie. I was just like, it's Inglourious Bastards in space. Yeah, I like it.
I like, outside of that, I like the fact that I'm not usually a fan of war movies, but I like the fact that it's like Star Wars meets a war movie. And I like the fact like Dirty Dozen meets
basically, which was like Inglourious Bastards was because of that beginning.
I don't like Tarantino, so I'll like if I can have a chance to leave out a Tarantino.
No, I gotcha. But the reason I say that is because that was my original review. Even though I gave the film originally a good review, I called it Star Wars Inglourious Bastards. Yeah, because the opening scene is exactly like Inglourious Bastards. If you've seen it,
I have heard.
It's almost verbatim the same damn thing. Like, they show, even though it's not their kid, everybody gets killed except for the one kid, basically, is what's is the same thing. Yeah. And she comes back for revenge later, and it's the whole kind of same story.
Oh, it's the chick that Tarantino choked out in the movie. Yeah. So in the making of Tarantino mentioned it in an interview with this British late night host. Where is like in filming the scene, he didn't like how the actor was originally fake choking the actress. So then Tarantino actually choked the actress.
Hopefully with her her approval.
Well, I mean, what, she's gonna say, no, don't fucking choke me, you creepy bastard? She'll be out of a job.
No, that's not necessarily true, but I mean, yeah.
I don't know. But yeah.
If you've ever been on the set of a movie, it's not as
I have.
Yeah, so it's not like an easy situation to like get away with something that crazy. It's not like it was back in the day with The Exorcist when speaking of maverick directors from back in the day, like we were earlier, when what's his face who directed the movie, what's his name? William Friedkin brought guns and shit on the set. And shit. Oh yeah, that he first he shot a gun off to scare an actress. And then in the scene where what's her face? I can't remember her name. Who plays the mom?
Okay. I forget her name too, but I know.
Anyway, she's in that scene where Reagan slaps her and she gets knocked back. She's being pulled on a pulley behind the wall. Well, and she complained to Friedkin that the stuntmen were pulling too hard, and to calm down a little bit because it was hurting her back. So he goes over and tells them, give it to her, give her all you fucking got. And they did, and she slammed against the wall. And not only that, she ended up having back issues ever since. Like they really fucked up her back.
Fucking asshole.
And then same thing. No, he was kind of a dick back then. He's known to have slapped actors before. Yeah. That scene just before the end when Father when he's giving Father Karras the final rites, the other father, Frederick or whatever his name is, Ellen Burns. Thank you, Tyler. When he's giving that other, when the other priest is giving him the rites, he slapped the actor before the scene because he wasn't doing it the way he wanted it. He's like, "You're not acting upset enough. Your best friend's fucking dying here, man. He's dying." He's like, "I don't know what you want from me." So he slaps him across the face, and he's like shaking. He's like, "Now act." And he just went down and did the scene. He's just like, that's why he's shaking in the scene. He's just like, ominous. It's like, just slap me.
Don't slap me again.
Or worst part of it though is what happened to the child actress. What's her name?
Blair, Linda Blair.
Blair, thank you. I'm so horrible with names. Sorry.
No, it's all right.
Because she got treated the worst between being in a nightgown, pretty much, and nothing much else, in frigid rooms for God knows how long, just so they could have the breath, show the breath. They were actually filming. They built that soundstage inside of a cooler unit, so they would turn it down below freezing, so they could get the air to burst from their mouths or whatever. What do you call it? The perspiration or whatever. The condensation or whatever. Yeah. So and then also in all the scenes where she's being flopped around in the bed and shit like that, she's in this harness, and a couple times the harness kept coming loose, so she was not only being whipped back and forth, but she was being whipped within the harness back and forth. So it was like slapping her around in the harness and shit. And, she couldn't do nothing because she's supposed to be screaming and hollering anyway, so she's trying to scream stop, kind of thing, and they just keep rolling because they think she's acting and shit. But oh yeah, they used to get away with shit like that all the time in movies. That was, I don't want to like single out Friedkin because he's not the only. There was a lot of shit they used to do back in the day that they could never get away with now.
I'm pretty sure that's. I'm pretty sure there's more creeps than Friedkin. I'm just kind of like, oh my fucking god.
No, I know, but the point is, I'm getting across is like that was just a thing, and you just dealt with it. Like now, if you did something like that, you would never get away with it. So I gotta imagine the actress is like, yeah, give it to me, Quentin, because this guy ain't gonna do it, right? Or whatever. Not so much as.
Actually, what's also true is in like apparently X-Men 2, Hugh Jackman to was it Kelly Hu?
Kubrick was another one, yeah.
He was actually like when they were doing the fight scenes, he was kind of being easy on her, and she's like, "No, give it to me harder." It's like, oh my god.
Yeah, you'll get some of them like that. Yeah,
yeah, it's like, dude, it's like, yeah, I don't believe.
Oh yeah, and speaking of Kubrick, he was another one who's famous for bringing guns on the set and scaring people, and so was the guy who directed Conan. What's his name? Milius. John Milius was a good one for doing shit like that too. Like that was an era. And Ford Coppola was another one who's known to be pretty much a dick sometimes too. But they got the movies made, man. I mean, none of them could get away with that shit. Now that's why I have a hard time believing certain stories from the set unless there's another point of view with it to kind of get context, because
I understand that.
It's very difficult to kind of believe certain stories sometimes.
Well, like what's funny, and kind of changing gears a little bit is like,
no, that's fine.
You're talking about John Lasseter. When you're talking about the John Lasseter story, I think I remember you were saying how like it was like basically, oh, it was just hugging people. It's like, and I remember seeing, I remember reading an op-ed article from some woman who worked in Pixar, and it was kind of like, and her original point of view was like, well, I didn't see this as a problem, but I guess it is. And it's like, it kind of did go a little bit like, because like some of the stuff was like, some of the things were like, well, oh, you know, you'd cut off women and stuff, like, you know, like from giving ideas and stuff. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, you go in there and you fucking be like, no, bitch, it's like, no, this is my idea. You know, you show more. It's like a lot of it was just like, oh, that's so fucking bullshit. It's like, it was just a lot of it was I'm cussing more than explaining. A lot of it was more of things where, you know, people needed to be more assertive. And be like, hey, you're violating my personal space. Fuck off.
That's one aspect of it. I don't know how much I can really talk about or should talk about it right now. Tyler is in the no. You'll kind of get what I'm getting at. Tyler's in the chat right now, and he knows what I'm talking about. But we've come in. How do I put this? We're not strangers at Disney. Like, I mean, we can almost say with confidence that they know who we are.
Okay.
They may not know us individually or anything like that, but they know of Midnight's Edge and what we kind of do. And in our research, I found a lot of things that made me really question what went down behind the scenes and how exactly and why exactly John Lasseter got ousted. And I'm trying to think of a diplomatic way to put this without putting myself in position with my foot in my mouth. No. It's all right. It's to a point, but there's things that have happened and come to light, and run-ins that we've had with individuals that really back up my original kind of feeling on this, even though in our Pixar video that we did, the story that's in that video is basically what's out in the media for the most part. So to be fair with that aspect, from that angle, that's the way it is. But from what I've seen and what I've found and what I've experienced, Lasseter was more or less a Me Too casualty. Because I look at it this way. There's people who felt like maybe their voice weren't being heard or their ideas were being stolen and then repurposed. Mm-hmm. But what I see is John Lasseter is your fucking boss, and he knows what's best for Pixar and Disney. And you may have a good idea, but he'll give you to make it a great idea. Yeah. And if you don't see it from that angle, that's your own fault. If you just see it as, oh, white man bad's taking my idea and taking credit for it, well, then that's a little short-sighted. Because this guy is going to, the next time, he's going to turn around and he's going to let you direct the next thing or whatever. You know, I don't think these people were seeing it from that angle. And there's plenty of stuff in his history to support that. Okay. That if you do a good job, you will move up the ladder at Pixar no matter what you are. Right. Now I can't say there isn't, maybe it's never been any kind of sexist environment there, but I don't see it. If you look at all the old Pixar pictures, there's quite a few women that worked there in a time when women didn't necessarily work in those industries. Right. So I can't imagine this is the kind of guy he is. And just because somebody's a huggy guy, yeah, like you said, just be a little more assertive if you don't like to be hugged. Right. You know, just be like, no, it's not my thing, pal. Or how about a bump, fist bump? Because most people understand when you say, how about a fist bump? They realize that, you know, you're either invading my space or I'm not, you know, there's something to where that's cool with me, nothing else. You know, people are cool with that generally. There's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, I think it was something that was blown so far out of proportion that he became a casualty that I don't know if anybody will really look back on and he'll ever get get back what he deserves if he really is innocent of doing anything wrong, which I truly, at the bottom of my heart, don't think he ever did. I really have a hard time believing the guy that made Wall-E and Cars and Toy Story is some deviant person. You know, I'm not saying that it's not possible, but I just don't think so.
Makes sense. I'll be honest. It was like because like to, you know, the animation side of things, it's like when Lasseter was gone, it's like, oh shit. And then when you heard this article, it was like supposed to be like oh shit, this is supposed to be the real explanation. And you read it, and I was looking at it, I was like, the fuck? Be more fucking assertive. Or it's like, oh, you know, if people say, oh, don't go in there because they may get a little handsy or something like that, it's like, well, all right, you go in there and you be like, if someone's giving you hands, be like, you move them away or stop.
Well, my problem is this, and people jumped on Matt Damon for saying this, but there's degrees of this shit that need to really be addressed. And that was the big problem, especially up front with the Me Too movement. And he was a part, Lasseter got wrapped up into the early parts to where you don't question the women, you just fucking get rid of the guy.
Yeah.
And that was the way it's in Bob Iger's book too. And I can say that because that's basically, because there's no moment in his book where he goes, you know, I've known Lasseter for this many years and I've never nothing. No, it's just like, I've heard these things about him. I got to get rid of him. At no point does he really investigate it. At no point does he take anything into consideration. Does he look at the bigger picture or anything like that? Nope. It's automatic. It's got to be done.
I agree.
You know? And you can't work like that. You can't run a society like that because that there's no due process. There's no justice there. You know, you gotta take your lumps. You know, anybody who's worked in corporate America knows what it's like. You're going to end up not getting the praise and the acknowledgement that for everything you do, but all you can do is rest assured that your boss, whoever, you know, that may be, is paying attention to where when it comes time, they give you the leg up or the step up that you deserve because you've been there and you've been loyal and you've done what you need to do to be a team. You know, that's the big problem I think that they have there behind Pixar and stuff. Yeah.
Well, like what I found was really ironic with like the Me Too stuff is you found like months after like the it was the Italian actress who was with Harvey Weinstein at first, and she was one of the main people who accused him of impropriety. She was found of doing impropriety with like a younger guy, and it's like,
oh, you're talking about our Dario Argento's kid.
Yes.
What the hell's her name? I can't think of it. Rosario Argento, I think it is.
I think so. Yeah, and it's like, and that's, to me, it was very telling.
Agia.
Yeah. To me, it was very telling because it's like it shows it's not a man or woman thing; it's a power thing, and if it's a power thing, it could be either side. But also too, it's like you should not just do listen and believe. You should listen but verify.
Right. Well, here's the thing is, you know, I'm not saying, and that's the thing. You're right. It's definitely a power thing. It's something that needed to be addressed. And I think it got misused and abused in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And that's what pissed me off the most about the Me Too movement was because it's like there are creeps in Hollywood. Absolutely. But you're using it more as a witch hunt than as a let's change the way we do business.
Yeah, and I gotta say, you know, and not to go down too far into this rabbit hole, but
I'm so sorry, I'm dragging you.
No. You'll see where I'm going with this. The one thing that came out of that whole Corey Feldman stuff so far is that it made me feel better that there's not as many pedophiles in Hollywood as people like to think. Because if he had much more to go on, that would have been much more bombastic than it was. It was really a big nothing burger. Literally everybody he named in that documentary, everybody already knew or has done their time. Mm-hmm. And everybody that he named was really questionable, considering he wasn't there between Corey Haim and Charlie Sheen. Mm-hmm. All he has on his side is some circumstantial evidence of an email from Corey Haim's mom verifying that she knew about this, even though she denied it later, and a few other people who claim that they heard the same story. So granted, there's that. Mm-hmm. But other than that, the one of the stories Corey told, I don't know if I could consider that necessarily anything, because it could be very easily considered an accident and the guy didn't do anything to him. The other one, though, is straight up, okay, fine. That person needs to be dealt with. But what we found out from that documentary, I think, was so much more was that it's not the big people, high power up people. It's the people that are close to the kids. It's the managers. It's the agents.
Right.
And again, it's like, okay, so that made me, I don't like that it's going on. I'm glad that it's finally getting out there more, but it makes me feel better that that wasn't worse than I thought it was going to be. Because it's like, people have this stigma about it, that there's this horrible problem in Hollywood. And I don't think it's as bad as the people make it out to be. And it's the same thing with the Me Too thing, because especially now where kids are actually more protected than they used to be.
True.
Now, granted, we know this stuff's happened way in the past, and I'm not saying that nothing happened to the Coreys or any of the other people that were discussed in those documentaries. Because like I said, all the people that were mentioned there, we already knew about. They've already been busted. So obviously the system worked there.
Well, there's so before crack.com got really crappy, there was an article written by I forget her name, but she was in Matilda and she was in Mrs. Doubtfire.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
She wrote this article, and it's kind of like where it's kind of like, well, you can't just be quick to blame, the moms or the parents for, not protecting their kid, because there's a lot of pressures that are kind of coming in.
Mara Wilson.
Yeah, thank you.
Tyler's here.
I know, dude. Tyler, you were Tyler's like, he was like, he got the actresses for the Exorcist. I almost said The Shining. Sorry. It was like come up with all these things. It's like, damn, dude, you're like super on top of everything. Yeah, it's like there's so many different influences for kids, for like screen, for screen kids. So many like bad influences. It's like you can't just like do like that knee-jerk thing of, oh, it's the parents' fault, oh, it's this person's fault, it's because like you're saying,
well, yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah,
I gotta find that article, but well, I don't want to find that article, honestly, but anyway.
But you're right. That's one of the points I think that was brought up more so in Corey's documentary that probably needs to be more addressed, and maybe has been a little bit in recent years. But that was the old thing, was I seen more of a problem of the kids growing up too fast. Like Drew Barrymore was another one where she was on the party scene way early. Oh, yeah. Lindsay Lohan. And that's the thing, is these kids get access to things that no normal kid their age should get access to, let alone would get access to. And that's the bigger problem. Right. Because that's the other thing is, I think that, and I say this again, feeling like I'm glad that the industry doesn't seem to be as bad as some people like to perceive it when it comes to this thing, because if it was worse, it would be a much more horrible thing. But I'm glad to see that, things are getting a little bit better than they used to be. Regulations are a little bit better. Hillary Duff, Emma Watson, all those kind of things, compared to what we see now with kids, as far as like, they got 20 people around them all the time, and rightfully so, right, to make sure that nothing happens to them, and that's a good thing. Absolutely.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like, I am glad that it's like I'm glad that evil thing hasn't happened, but there's a lot of other evil things that happen.
Yeah, and I'm glad they're starting to bite down on that too. Like, notice like Lindsay Lohan was probably in Hillary Duff, and a few of them were from some of the last of that young party generation where they're like, we got to put a stop to this shit. And it's a good thing. And you can't feel sorry for those kids. They should not be partying at 2:00 in the morning at some club with 20, 30-year-olds when they're only 13, 14 years old. There's no reason for it, and that's the problem. And then a lot of times you're right. There's certain times I'm sure, parents should step up a little bit more though, maybe, or they're trusting the wrong people. And these people are the ones taking advantage of the fact that they have, a famous celebrity that they're in, a kid or whatever, regardless. And they use these kids to get into clubs and whatnot too. So it's not just the kids, it's not just the parents, it's the influences around it. And I'm glad that they're starting to notice that shit.
I agree with you. And I think the best way to kind of cap that conversation is it's one of those things where people will always think of the children, except when it's needed the most.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, that's yeah, yeah.
We're kind of moving from that.
Absolutely. But as far as the other part too, yeah, I've heard a lot of stories. The Me Too movement is to me, it's a lost cause. It was a sad attempt to try and normalize a situation but what it did is try to point the finger at everybody else. And what I mean by that is Hollywood, corporate America, and DC, Washington, politics, whatever, are the only places where all these horrible things that they're throwing at us in our movies, in our face on Twitter, and the things that we talked about earlier, all those things. Those are the only places where a lot of these things still exist. Racism, all that shit. No.
Also to the financial area too.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Corporate America. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, the upper areas where there's power, and like you said, it all boils down to power. Where there's extreme powers, where a lot of this stuff still, and that's because certain people crave it and certain people have it. And that's the problem. And in the past, that's why a lot of the quote unquote victims have never really been listened to. And I'm not saying it's right, but what I'm saying is it's because it's so tough to believe somebody when they cry rape, when the person that they're pointing at and crying rape to, is a billionaire. And, it's like, well, why would they, in a movie star and Tom Cruise or whoever, looks like, why would they want to rape somebody when they can get any woman they want to do anything they want for them? So It's easier for somebody to believe that woman just didn't get something she wanted as opposed to the other thing happening. But that's flip flop now. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but what's wrong about it is I've just talked about for the last 20 minutes is how that's been weaponized.
Yeah.
How it's been used in ways that are not correct, and the reason why it's been tough to, without some kind of conclusive hard evidence, to do something like throw Bill Cosby in prison or Harvey Weinstein in prison, as much of an asshole as he is, or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's a monster, but it's like probably should have gotten.
And I'll be honest with you, by the end of that trial, I wasn't necessarily convinced he deserved to go to jail. To be honest with you,
I don't know.
I'll be honest, I listened to it a lot closer than I reported on. And I'll be honest, if it was anybody else, if it was you, me, Tyler in the chat, anybody, and the girls said the same things, and we weren't Harvey Weinstein,
we would have probably gotten off.
We would have probably gotten off because there's so much circumstantial evidence, and the moment that you have, and not to go too far on this stuff, but just the moment you have a consensual relationship, it's very tough in any kind of court situation to prove any kind of non-consensual sex. That's the problem.
No, I agree with you. That's one of my big kind of pet peeves with how we legally.
No, I'm not saying that doesn't mean that rape can't exist within marriage and rape can't exist within a relationship. But no, just to clear my own air.
No. Okay, I'm not saying that can't happen. It's just because the rules on the books are kind of written in a way where
I wasn't directing that at you either.
Okay, I was like, oh God,
no. I was just saying it for my own ass. In case somebody hears this and they think that I'm thinking, no. I'm just saying that.
Is that it's from what I understand the legal side of it, and I'm not a lawyer for those out there, is that the grounds of what constitutes things of rape is a very murky area, and it needs to just get my personal not so humble opinion is it needs to be ironed out that more. Because if it's too murky, it's hard to prove and it's hard to get evidence.
Well, yeah, and you're right about that, because I've heard of situations where, not to go off of whatever, but where people have been violated and the person got off because of stupid rules or not rules, but stupid gray areas in the law. And, a smart lawyer will find a loophole, as, we're about to say, and that's what happens. Something simple and stupid as, well, she wasn't awake to give or not give consent, so let's not consider it. That's you know what I mean? And there have been people who have been working on changing those laws too, thankfully. But yeah. And that's the thing is you're right. That's the problem with anything, kind of going back to the whole Google talk before too, is you can't have these arbitrary rules that conflict with each other. You got to have, and that's with entertainment, that's with anything. And I'm not one who loves to be ruled over or anything like that, but when it comes to certain things, there's a reason why logic works. And
Right.
if you don't work by a certain angle, you can't tell people not to dive in less than 5 feet of water, but say it's okay to dive and not have a pool that has more than 5 feet of water in it. That's kind of the whole point we were getting at before.
Absolutely. I'm kind of a bit of a, I kind of agree with that idea of John Locke, where it's like the consent of the governed, where it's like, okay, in exchange, there's a trade-off that we get from being in a society, and it's like the rules we have to have to live by. It's like, okay, I give up some personal freedoms in order to live in society, and you have to you do stuff for me in order to peacefully coexist in society.
Exactly. Well, the thing is I think that the bottom line is most of us all agree on the basics. We don't need to kill each other. We don't want to hurt each other. We don't want to take each other's shit.
Yeah.
At least those were nice,
absolutely.
And don't do stuff to kids and animals. That's pretty much it.
Absolutely. And my point is that I find is that you get the rules are much easier to follow if they're simple and clear. And it's like the fact that it's not simple, like the fact that over time there are things that kind of further convolute things, it makes it hard to kind of live together as people.
Absolutely.
For example, like we as a society, we agree you don't touch some random person's butt. Okay, cool. You don't touch a person's butt. And it's like, and if you get slapped, that person shouldn't get sued for assault.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the thing is us in the normal world have lived that way for the last God knows how many years now since, women's lib and the civil rights movement and everything like that. But like we were saying, corporate Hollywood, Washington, and of course, or corporate America and Hollywood, I meant to say, and Washington, all that kind of stuff. Those areas, they're the only places where they haven't really progressed.
No.
So then now they feel like that everybody's behind the system, not just them. They don't get it.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, because I'm sure you've worked and you've had at some point in your life you've had a boss that was a woman.
Oh yeah.
Or you've worked with a black person and he's gotten paid just as much as you have, or she's gotten paid just as much as you have. That's the thing. And I doubt you've ever even worked anywhere. I've asked this on many a podcast where. Have you ever worked anywhere you've seen anybody or heard anybody have a problem where there's been a sexual assault case situation brought down? Hell no. Not usually, maybe one or two rare cases.
I quashed one because I was kind of the guy in charge, and one of my coworkers was creeping on another one. And I quashed that by basically saying, you better stop or I will do everything in my power to make sure you don't have a job. And then the next one, I got in trouble. But it was because I mentioned to a friend in a chat thing that I wanted to sleep with one of my coworkers.
Oh, so you got thrown under the bus. Well, and to be honest with you, there's nothing wrong with it. You didn't really do anything wrong outside of the rules within your job, technically. And if that guy would have never lied to you, you still didn't do anything wrong other than committing a thought crime. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. But I mean, at the same time, it's like, I get what I like.
But you own it and you take responsibility for it, even though I don't think it was fair. I totally do. So that's cool with that. And I've never, ever had a problem with that. I've never worked anywhere where I've ever had a problem with that. The closest I've ever had that was, and of course, obviously I'm not going to name any names, but it was a consensual relationship between two adults, but one of them just happened to be a manager and the other one wasn't. So it was one of those situations where when the district manager found out there was a relationship there, basically one of them was going to have to go. And since the higher one up was a higher one up involved in it, then they had to, it was kind of one of those things, but it was like there was no assault in the case at all. There was no coercion. It was just a situation kind of like yours where the wrong person heard. Nobody else had a problem with it that worked there. Nobody else felt like this person was getting any kind of favoritism or anything like that. But since it was corporate rules, it just happened to be that way.
Situation where it was that person did get special favoritism, but in all fairness, we were kind of like we just were kind of like it's like, all right, they understood it. They didn't really complain. They're just like, all right, fuck this person. One of my first jobs in this job I worked,
right.
But it was kind of like, there was impropriety, but it's like they didn't really care because they didn't really care.
Yeah, I mean, well, and I'm not trying to say it's okay either, but again, there's that aspect of as long as it's not hurting anybody, as long as there's no perceived favoritism there.
Exactly. That's my point. It was like the fact is that it was my point was the fact is that everybody knew.
Right.
Everybody knew, so everybody was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. All right, whatever. They're annoyed about it, frustrated about it, but it's like they weren't.
But you could live with it.
That was my point. That was my point entirely. It was like
it wasn't bad enough that you needed to bring it up to.
Yeah, exactly. So you didn't need.
But that's the sad part is we live in a world where people feel like they should weaponize shit like that.
I don't get it.
I know. I don't know why this ever happened or where this ever came from.
That's why I want to go into business with myself, because I figure.
I hear you.
I figure it's like, all right, if I at least, it's like if I work for myself, then the only person I get to sexually harass is myself. So all right,
I know I've got 6 cases against myself already. I don't know. I got to take it easy.
But no, that's man.
No, it's funny. The closest I ever came to anything like that was some girl who tried pulling some bullshit on me, but I had more than enough proof. So it was a pretty quick situation that went pretty easily. That could have been dicey, but yeah.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, that was years ago. Luckily, it was in the time of internet though, to where I had the proof.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I had the visual proof.
Tom, it's almost 1 o'clock. I know for you it's much later.
That's all right.
If you want, I'm happy to end it now. In all honesty, I could probably talk movies and shit with you for like another 3 hours. But
yeah, I hear you.
I know you can't. So if you want, we can leave now.
I could probably stick around for another few minutes, but yeah, my dog's wanting to go out, and I'm gonna have to use the restroom here soon too. So.
Okay, cool. Tom, before I forget, thank you again for coming onto my stream.
Oh, absolutely, no problem.
And also to Tyler and Stig and everybody else, thank you for coming. I do appreciate it. My heart melts.
I try to help out everybody I can, and I can't guarantee everybody's going to be able to jump on with us when we're doing our things all the time. But if I'm available, and I'm always open to chat with just about anybody. So,
okay, I know because of the situation, it doesn't really bring much. There's not really much of a thing, but also likewise too. If I can, I'm happy to jump on.
Oh, absolutely, and don't think that I don't take that into consideration either. So I didn't mean to say that to make you feel like that's not a possibility.
No, I just feel bad because it's like, dude, I don't have. It's like there is no like this. The audience came for you, which was awesome, but they came for you, which is great. And it's like that's why it's like I can't really return the favor, but hey, I'm happy to return.
I like to pretend that I'm something special, but really, Midnight's Edge is a symbol that's so much bigger than I ever could be. And as much as I love being a part of that, I could never be as. I'm humbled when people say that, because I could never be as charismatic as somebody like Gary or Doomcock or Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers and stuff like that. So I find it humbling when people say it, but I appreciate it a lot. And the work we do, I hope, speaks enough for all the work we do. So
I'm gonna be straightforward with you. Actually, you're one of the people who kind of do get me inspired to actually go in front of the camera, and it's not because of per se shyness. It's just I get kind of like, well, what the fuck am I going to talk about?
I used to be more in front of the camera than I am now, but yeah.
I'm like, who am I, dude? I'm just some dude, because it's like there's opinions that like I share opinions with like so many different people. It's like, who the am I, man? That's why I would rather just like make cartoon. Like, I'll be honest, if I was able to get it done faster, I would just make cartoons all day and just like not have to be in front of the camera and just do voice acting and stuff. Because it's like I don't want to just talk about, like, that's why I view you guys, like I view I almost called Rob Tom. I view you, I view Rob, I view Gary and Doomcock and Mecca. It's like you guys are pundits. And and it's like that, and it's like I'm not trying to, it's like there's a certain thing about, it's like what you do is like there's people who can do it and there's people who can't, and I can't.
No, you're doing all right. It takes practice and time, man. Of course, like you said, not everybody can do it.
Right.
You can sometimes only get so far. I mean, getting on one of the bigger channels or whatever can get you some subscribers, but you are what, and this is what I told Gary, and this is ironic because this is what I told Gary early on. He didn't have that many subscribers when I first met him.
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised, and I told him, you got it. You're going to get it there. Just trust me on this. I'm like, you have the charisma. People are going to come for you. And you just have to trust in yourself and just be yourself. That's a big part. I mean, yeah, you're kind of doing a caricature of yourself in a way. Because, I here laid back with you talking is probably more me than I'm doing when I'm, of course, I'm on when I'm doing like After Dark and shit like that. But you get what I'm saying. To a point, it's still me. It's still a true part of me. Mm-hmm. You're going to get, there's times where I still get overly, like, am I saying something stupid? Am I looking stupid? Am I, I do that all the time too. You're going to do that from time to time. Just don't fret. If it's something you're meant to do, it will pan out. I've seen a lot of people succeed at this job. I've seen a lot of people fail at this job. I've seen a lot of people that have failed miserably. I've seen a lot of people who failed gracefully. I've seen a lot of people who've had great success, and I've seen people who've had shitty success. Yeah. And what I mean by that is they had success they didn't necessarily deserve or work for. But that doesn't mean that you can't do it yourself. If you're somebody, but if you find out after a while that's just not for you to be in front of the camera or even on the mic and doing your animation is what you do, then maybe that's what you do. It's what it is. You can't say you didn't take a shot. True. That's what matters. That's what matters most of all than anything else in the world. Is I don't regret anything that I failed at because at least I took a shot.
There's one part of the reason like why I'm really like kind of want a dead set to do with the animation is because it's like I notice is like using like compare and contrast with like Comicsgate, for example. It's like, yes, there started out as the punditry of like your boy Zach or EVS, and then it's like when they were kind of called to put their money where their mouth is, they're able to create original entertainment with their stuff. And it's like I hope now my goal would be is like if I could be able to create independent, it's like if I could be able to create the independent entertainment, so while you guys be the pundits, I can do the anime, the entertainment. And so then instead of just being like a bunch of, instead of kind of being known as a bunch of loud people, we're just, giving our opinions. It's like, here, no, we put our money where our mouth is, and this is how you should do it.
Oh, and that's a great way of putting it, because a lot of people do. Luckily, some people have it a little easier than others as far as like what they want to do, because animation is not easy, man.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah, I know how it is, man. I mean, and I envy anybody who can do it. So
thing is too is like animators too are like some of the most neurotic people you'll ever meet. And so it's kind of like you wonder how anybody got anything done.
Trust me, I'm one of those where I can understand gaffes and mess ups in movies more than anything, as opposed to acting or story problems, because I've done enough of this stuff on the fly, under pressure, to the point where I understand where certain things are going to get goofed up. But if the intention's there, that means so much more to me as a viewer than it does if you get every little technical thing maybe right on the screen, but the stories are crap, the characters are crap. So, like George Lucas said famously years ago, special effects, you can have all the greatest special effects in the world, but not without a story or interesting characters, because otherwise they're just nothing but special effects.
Well, see, I always worry about with the animation is that yeah, you may have a good story, or anything like that, but if it doesn't have anything like for example, like a good fight scene, it's like if you're making an action cartoon and it's mainly keyframes and stuff, it's like that's kind of sucks. It's kind of like, nah, do you need to beef up the action stuff? You need to have something, you know, that can kind of draw people in. Because that's my always big concern, is because it's like, oh no, I want it to look like I actually have talent instead of just doing.
No, I hear you, and if you can take the time to do it, because I'm one of those, like I said, especially now. I mean, if you can stumble upon my older stuff, it's one thing, but I didn't have the time to really goof around with stuff now. I just have to get it done.
I actually seen some of your old stuff because I found your old YouTube channel one time.
Oh goodness gracious! What'd you watch?
Here, when I watched it, I noticed it's like, oh hey, you're using the bone tool from Adobe Flash. And it's like, some parts like, oh okay, hey, you're using, which is fine. It's fine. I use it too, so that's what I noticed.
I actually use a program. It's called Anime Studio, so it must use that as its base. There you go. Yeah.
Whole thing very similar to Adobe Flash, or now Adobe.
Probably,
Animate.
yeah.
It does. I looked. I researched that. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
No, I forget the video off the top of my head because this was I think it was, I want to say maybe, well now it's April, so probably like somewhere around February or January I found it. I was at work. I was at work listening to audio. I had listening to audio. That was my job. Listening to audio. So I put stuff on in the background so I don't go stir crazy. Anyway, thank you very much, Tom.
No problem, man.
It is an absolute pleasure. And thank you, Tyler, for like totally blowing up the chat with and the two other people who are watching. Thank you both. You guys have a great night. Stay healthy, and any other good thing I can think of. Bye. End broadcast. Back.